Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 2 of the meeting of the Georges River Local Planning Panel for the Georges River LEP 2020, which, due to COVID-19 restrictions, is being held electronically. My name is Paul Vagotis, and I'm the chair of this panel today. I'm currently streaming from the Council Chambers in McMahon Street, Hurstville. The panel members who make up the panel today are Mr. John Brockhoff, one of our expert panel members, Mr. Michael Levy, another expert panel member, and Anne Hotas, being our community representative. Under Section 3.32 of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act, Council is the planning proposal authority for the proposed Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. This planning proposal was reported to the Council's Environment and Planning Committee on the 11th of November 2019, and then subsequently to the full Council at its meeting on the 25th of November 2019. However, Council was unable to form a quorum at the Council meeting as a result of the Council laws appropriately managing pecuniary interests in accordance with the provisions of the Council's Code of Conduct adopted on the 27th of May 2019, which reflects the New South Wales Model Code of Conduct 2018. Due to the lack of a quorum at the Council meeting on the 25th of November 2019, the Acting General Manager subdelegated the Council's function as the planning proposal authority to the Georges River Local Planning Panel, pursuant to Section 378 of the Local Government Act 1993. The panel acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land on which this meeting is being broadcast as the Bidigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm required to advise you that under the provisions of the Environmental Planning Assessment Act 1979, this meeting of the panel is being live streamed and will be made available on the Council's website. In accordance with the revised meeting protocols during the COVID-19 pandemic, interested parties wishing to make representations to the panel were requested to register a summary of their interests, being no more than 2 pages in length, for an officer to be read during the meeting. Given the Council had received over 1,000 submissions, the meeting has been arranged to be held over 2 days, this being day 2, to provide the community with the opportunity to present their issues to the panel. The panel understands that 54 registered persons are speaking. If the oral representations made to the panel contain any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language, this may result in the author being exposed to liability for which this Council or the panel takes no responsibility for. Any part of this meeting that is held in closed session will not be recorded. The panel members have received a completed report entitled Outcomes of the Public Exhibition and Finalisation of the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020 from Council staff. The panel individually have undertaken their own inspections of various sites and nearby localities for the matters on the agenda today. As required by the Local Planning Panel Code of Conduct, panel members are required to disclose any conflicts of interest in respect to any matter on the agenda for the panel meeting today. The relevant forms as prescribed by the New South Wales Department of Planning have been completed and are tabled for the Council to be included in the online minutes of the meeting. No panel member has disclosed any conflict of interest in any of the matters on today's agenda. As we progress through the matters on the agenda, only those persons who the panel have highlighted as wishing to speak with, who were advised prior to the meeting, will be verbally able to make representations to the panel. The panel have received and reviewed the representations forwarded prior to the meeting, together with the submissions provided during the exhibition period of the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. Each written representation received via an application to make representations to the LPP form have been forwarded to the panel. I would ask those persons that are addressing the panel that they speak clearly and of a volume that will project into the speakers to assist all panel members and those viewing the live streaming so they can hear clearly what is being said. At this time, I also remind these persons that any defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may result in the author being exposed to liability for which the panel and the Council take no responsibility for. Once we've heard all the oral submissions, members of the public are free to continue to listen to the broadcast. The determination of the report will be made in closed session, which will not be live streamed or recorded. The determination will be available on the Council's website within 24 hours of the meeting being held. So we'll now turn to the first speaker for today, who is Ms. Jenny Simpson. Can we get Ms. Simpson on the line, please?
The caller is connected, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Simpson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. Good morning. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission, so please proceed.
Yes, thank you. This is in regards to the LEP draft and the housing strategy and inclusive housing drafts that were on public display. Just making sure I'm reading the right form. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. So feel free to make your submission.
Yes, yes. My review was as per my written submission. This is more of an opportunity to voice my opinion in terms of having reviewed a document that my biggest concern were three areas. One is the overall systems impact, the sustainability and the delivery of the strategy and plan, and thirdly, whether due process in terms of processing the community feedback and what are the actionable outcomes coming out of it. They were my main areas of concern, having reviewed a document and the process of what's involved, especially during the pandemic. So coming back to my first point was having reviewed the documents in detail, I wasn't seeing a lot of the overall, there'll be a lot of impact as a result of the changes to the, in terms of whether with the projected increase in population in the area, infrastructure, whether our services can handle that. I know there's interdepartmental jurisdictions in terms of infrastructure, but at the end of the day, it impacts the people and the businesses that are in the area. And so my concern is the infrastructure, whether it's as simple as utilities, services in terms of medical care, aged care, disability care, education, amenities in local community services, whether there is that whole ecosystem impact analysis that goes into the changes that are proposed. I know there is a lot of good things that are proposed in the draft, but I'm looking at it from a bigger system analysis point of view. And so, yeah, it'll be good to make sure there's some impact modelling done, and that with the changes, the area does have capacity to handle all those changes from a whole system point of view and interrelated dependencies. Because the last thing we want is, as ratepayers, to suffer as a result of that change, and it has to be an economical, viable model that is proposed, but also the quality of life of the ratepayers in the area are not negatively impacted. So that's the first point. The second area of sustainability in terms of how sustainable can those can we deliver the strategy and the plan that is being proposed in the draft document. I know when we talk about sustainability, a lot of it is in the environmental point of view, and that is one aspect. The other aspect is the economical viability. As the area grows, obviously hopefully there'll be a growth, but at the same time, with an increase in the demand in services, there is a sustainability issue in terms of economics, whether the ratepayer will have to keep wearing if the cost to deliver services and the infrastructure outstrips the ability to the expenditure on it, then ultimately is the ratepayer that come off second best. I know during the year we had a letter to say, you know, rates increased, and at the end of the day, is it value for the people that are contributing to that pool of budget? And that is one of my sustainability fears, apart from the environmental, that is probably the loudest voice in the community at the moment. There is the economic sustainability element of the changes that have been put in place. So that's my second point. And the third point is biggest concern in terms of, at times of COVID, I was surprised that draft documents come out. I know there is a, you know, it is stated there is a state government deadline, but the interesting thing is even the state member for the area is lobbying hard to seek an extension or some kind of, you know, when the community are in less lockdown and people are more able to access the public exhibitions, be able to get together and have community discussions about it. I know not everyone's up with the technology, whether it's by phone or by Zoom meetings and webinars, etc. So there is a degree of unfairness in the process that's been pursued by pushing this out during times of our 1 in 100 year pandemic and the devastating economic impact and the personal life upheaval of individuals in our community. So whether due process has been followed, I know there is a government protocol, but at the same time, yeah, I do question whether there is enough of a sample size or response rate that has been gathered from the ratepayers in the area compared to if we weren't in the middle of a 1 in 100 year pandemic. And that is a big concern. So they're my three big areas of submission response in response to the draft documents that are put forward for the LEP housing strategy and the inclusive housing plan proposal.
All right, thank you, Ms. Simpson. Just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions of the panel. Any questions? Sure. No, nothing further, ma'am. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you. Appreciate you listening.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Sonia Ritter. Oh, I'm sorry, Backstand. Is that right? Sonia Ritter from Backstand.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Hello, is that Ms. Backstand? Hello. Are you there, Ms. Backstand? Hello, Ms. Backstand, are you there?
Just connecting.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Baxton, are you there? Hello. Ms. Baxton, are you there?
Just trying again, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hello, Ms. Baxton. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Ms. Baxton.
Am I on?
Is that you?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission.
Okay,
so please proceed, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sonia, and I live in Oatley Park Avenue, which is the main road that runs into Oatley Park. Now, Oatley Park, I think, could be said to be the jewel in the bushland crown of Georges River Council. And what I find very upsetting is that there are going to be 2,300 houses being removed from the foreshore scenic protection area. these houses have provided a lovely transition zone from Oatley Park. So in Oatley Park Avenue, for example, I know people who have had echidnas in their backyard. We've had snakes. We've got lots of red, yellow-tailed cockatoos, black cockatoos, lots of birds. The building blocks allow a garden and mature trees. If the building block size is reduced to 450 square metres, there'll be no room for a yard. And there'd be a lot of mature trees go, and that transition between Oatley Park, the animals don't just stop at the gate, they actually come into the surrounding streets. And there's, I don't know if you know, but there are also even little swamp-tailed wallabies up in Oatley Park, and I've seen them actually on the road outside the park. So you can't just expect the animals to know the boundary of Oatley Park. Their habitat actually extends in the streets adjoining the park. So I think it would be a very short-sighted decision to reduce the size of the building blocks. And so that's one thing. Another thing is it also provides, the current foreshore scenic protection area provides a nice, we've got local creek tea, Dairy Creek and Miles Dunphy, and that provides just a little bit more habitat for animals around the creek line. I'm also a very keen kayaker. Now, can I just ask, can I ask if the panel has done a site inspection?
This is of Oatley Park.
No, just of the area that's being spoken about.
Yes,
you know.
Yes, we have. We're very familiar.
Well, so we kayak on the river, and if you went to Webster's Lookout and looked out east towards Como Bridge, you look out and you see Oatley Point and Jewfish Point, and it's just beautiful and green. And the ridges, up on the ridges, the trees are green as well. So with the proposed removal of houses along the ridge line of Jewfish Point and Oatley Point, you would lose that vision. It would just lose the greenery. When you go to Kitchener Street on the eastern side of Oatley or Oatley Point, and you look across to Connells Point, there are 3 layers of houses and a palm tree if you're lucky. It's just very high density. There's no habitat. And as it is at the moment, when you look from Webster's Lookout, you can see that Oatley Park and the bush that actually extends along the foreshore. If you reduce the building block size to the houses that are currently would remain in the foreshore to 700 metres, that's really not enough either for the habitat to continue. So I'm very much promoting option 3 to keep the existing foreshore scenic protector as it is, because I think once the greenery is gone, it will just become, even though the building blocks might be steeper, building technology has now improved and people build houses anywhere. And I think even in yesterday's Herald, there was an article talking about the importance of greenery. And I think we're very lucky here that we have preserved so many mature trees. And the animals, I don't know, I see it in Oatley Park Avenue, which is under threat of being removed from the foreshore protection area, that the animals don't just stop at the boundary. If you take away the mature trees, I just think you won't get a second chance. So I really ask, could you please leave the existing foreshore scenic protection area? If you need to put new houses somewhere, would look at Narwee. Narwee's very run down, very unloved shopping precinct. They would welcome urban renewal. Beverly Hills would welcome urban renewal. Oatley, somewhere else out of the scenic foreshore protection areas. So that's all. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, and yeah, please consider all that I've said. Thank you.
All right, just hold the line, Ms. Baxter, and I'll see if there are any questions of the panel members.
Yep. Happy for questions.
No questions. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good day. Moving to our next submitter, it's Stella Magro.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Hello, is that Ms. Magro? Hello.
Hello.
Yes, Ms. Magro, you're connected to the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission. Please proceed.
I just wanted to make a submission, as we are actually going up against a public place of worship in our local vicinity, and people are saying that it doesn't affect the community, it doesn't affect parking, it doesn't affect anything like that. And I just wanted to put across, as somebody that is and has and is up against it now, that having a public place of worship in a residential area does affect multiple things, including parking, safety, everything like that. So that's like, yeah, nothing, I didn't want to have too much to say. I just wanted to let you know that as a resident, it does have an effect, and we are, I just don't believe that public places of worship should be in residential areas. They should be in like factory areas. Hello?
Yes, hello. Please continue.
That's, yeah, that I didn't have much to say. I just wanted to let you know that as a resident, it does affect that. I don't believe that it should, not any public places of worship should be placed in R2 zoning. It has multiple effects on residents, and that's all I really wanted to say. That I don't think anything should go through regarding public places of worship in R2 zoning.
All right, okay. Can I ask, what do you perceive to be the impacts?
So the impact is parking, disrupting people that actually live in the area, because traffic is longer periods of time for public places of worship. The foot traffic, motors, doors, there's multiple things that has to be put in place where that wouldn't be put in place for house or units or anything like that. That would be in a residential area where public places of worship, you have people coming out every half an hour from anywhere from 5 o'clock in the morning till midnight, some places. And then you have stuff like Christmas, weddings, that actually affect multiple residents for longer than those times, because you're there after those. It affects sleeping, it affects just general interactions of the neighbourhood. Everything like that, it does affect.
All right. Thank you. I'll just see if there are any further questions. Yes, Ms. Rahotis has a question for you.
Yes.
Hi,
thank you.
Do you currently live in the vicinity of a place of worship?
I have, sorry. So I have lived in a place of in the vicinity of a place of public worship approximately 3 years ago, which I moved away for that reason. And at this point, my parents are actually going up against putting a place of public worship in an R2 zoning. And they're going up against the exact same thing that I moved away from.
Okay, thank you. It's good to know that you've got first-hand experience of what you're describing. Thank you.
All right, just hold on. There is another question from Mr. Brockhoff.
Oh, thank you. I've got a question. Where do you think the most appropriate places for places of worship are in terms of their setting? And do you distinguish between different types or times of place of worship?
So I believe that they should be in more of a factory area or a area that isn't surrounded by people per se with housing. So that's what the factory areas where I'd say, or in an area that isn't surrounded by houses, so an R2 zoning virtually. But to me, each culture has different timings on like their times of prayer, everything like that. But no matter what culture, what background, they all have big, I can't even think, like they have big, like Christmas, Easter has for Catholic, they have Ramadan for mosques, something's going to always affect it more than their hours that they've put on generally. So I know as a Catholic, we do church for Easter Sunday, and you do it after midnight, you have midnight mass. With Ramadan, I know it goes for a month, and then they do it late at night, and they start, their latest is 11:45, they have their last prayer with the bells. So either way, it's going to affect, regardless of what it is, it's going to affect the residents.
Thank you.
No problem.
Please remain on the line, ma'am. We have another question from Mr. Levy.
Yes, just to clarify your concern around the churches, I'm just trying to get a better understanding about what part of the plan is of concern to you, and particularly to let you know that one of the things the plan is looking to do is to remove churches from being a permitted use in the low density residential zone, with existing churches having some protection because they are there. But the draft LEP is in fact looking to limit the location of these types of uses in residential areas. So I'm just trying to understand your concern with the draft LEP.
I'm not against the draft. I agree with the draft that they shouldn't be in a place of public worship shouldn't be in an R2 zoning.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your
Not a problem.
Our next submitter, Ms. Anne Wagstaff.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Hello, is that Ms. Wagstaff? Are you on the line?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make your oral submission. Can I just start off by saying that we have certainly read your submission, which is very comprehensive, and the panel yesterday has heard a number of submissions from your fellow residents in Odeley about the proposed impacts of the removal of the foreshore scenic protection area, and in particular the matters that you raise in your submission about tree canopy, biodiversity, the impacts to biodiversity, stormwater runoff, water pollution, scenic views, housing, the equity and the consistency, have all been duly noted by the panel, and we've heard extensive submissions on those subjects. So it's not that I don't want to cut you off, but it's just that we're fully across those issues. So please proceed on that basis.
Thank you. To whom am I speaking, please?
Paul Vagotis, I'm the chair.
Hello, Mr. Vagotis. Yes, good morning. This planning proposal for Council's LEP 2020 was prepared in accordance with two guides that were prepared by the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment. The department's guide to preparing local environment plans states, quote, "The LEP is a legal instrument that implements the land use vision and planning priorities set out in a local strategic planning statement." The guide goes on to say that clause 3.9 of the Act requires all councils to prepare and make a local strategic planning statement. The statements will shape how the development controls in an LEP evolve over time to meet the community's aspirations and needs in the context of regional or district planning for priorities, with the LEP being the legal instrument to deliver the local strategic planning statement. And any proposed amendment to an LEP must therefore give effect to an endorsed local strategic planning statement. Now, the Department's Guide to Preparing Planning Proposals states that the planning proposal, quote, must also demonstrate how the proposed instrument will give effect to the local strategic planning statement of the council of the area, end of quote. So I now come to a key action of council's own local strategic planning statement. It's A84, and that is expand the foreshore scenic protection area across the LGA through council's LEP 2020. Now, I refer you to paragraph 90 of the report in front of you. Could you please read out the last sentence in that paragraph, please, Mr. Bagotas?
Sorry, paragraph 90?
Paragraph 90, yes.
Yep, okay.
The last sentence, would you mind reading it out, please? To everybody.
Last sentence,
to everybody.
the total of 1,297 residential zone lots in the former Cogra LGA will be included in the proposed FSPA. Is that the sentence?
Thank you very much.
That the sentence?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Bagotas. Yeah, that's one sentence now. Now, I now refer you to paragraph 88. Could you read out the last sentence in that paragraph, please?
Total of 2,380 residentially zoned lots are proposed to be removed from the FSPA in the former LGA, Hurstville LGA.
From the existing FSPA, yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So by my calculation, that is a net loss of 1,083 lots from the existing FSPA. In other words, a contraction, a shrinkage, not an expansion of the foreshore scenic protection area across the LGA through Council's LEP 2020, and is therefore at complete odds with the Council's own local strategic planning statement. Now, given that these key figures, 1,297 and 2,380, were not in the council report that was presented to the local planning panel last Friday, it raises many questions. So I'd like to ask Mr. Brockhoff and Mr. Levy, as they were both on that local planning panel back in February, I asked the question for each of them. When did you first learn that 1,297 lots in the former Cogra LGA were to be included in the proposed foreshore scenic protection area?
All right. Well, Ms. Waxer, before we do that, can you just also outline any further issues you have?
No, this is my only issue. I'm sticking to this issue, okay, because you've just informed me that you're well across all of them. I just have some questions there.
All right, just hold on and I'll ask Mr. Brockhoff.
Thank you.
I'm aware of the LSPS and I'm aware of and thoroughly read the document.
That's not what,
in the LEP.
excuse me, that's not the question I asked. I asked, when did you first learn that 1,297 lots in the former Cogra LGA were to be included in the proposed foreshore scenic protection area? When did you first learn about this number?
I'll answer the question in a way that makes sense for me, and that is I was aware the proposed extension of the foreshore scenic protection area to the Cogra part, the former Cogra part of the LGA, would include additional lots, and I was aware that a proposed revision of foreshore management area in Hurstville would reduce lots over the course of this year.
So I'm asking you, when was the first time you learned about these numbers, these specific numbers that are very key to our community's campaign and concerns about what council wants to do to our area and the foreshore of its own council area?
I can't give you a specific date, I'm sorry.
Right. Well, that probably answers my question, because as I'm just telling you and informing you, those figures were not provided to you in the council report back in February. They weren't provided to any of the residents when council put documents up on public exhibition, and it was only because of residents such as me and others asking council how many properties were going to be removed. And when they first provided me the numbers, it turned out they were wrong. And council finally provided these numbers in a little fact sheet, frequently answered question fact sheet, which they quietly uploaded overnight, more than 6 weeks into the public exhibition period. This is you've been deceived. This is what I believe you've been deceived. You and Mr. Brockhoff or Mr. Levy, I don't know who I'm speaking to, have both been deceived. Our community's been deceived, and it's very sad. And it's very wrong. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you'll take that in consideration. We've been deceived. Thank you.
Ms. Wagstaff, can you just hold the line? Mr. Levy would like to make a comment.
Thank you. Michael Levy here. Look, I can assure you that I certainly haven't been deceived with the draft LEP that's been put before us. It was evident when we first considered this in February that there was a change to the foreshore protection area, and we had a look at the planning basis for that, as was recommended. I can't recall if the number of affected properties was referenced as a part of that, but the number of properties is not in itself critical to the planning considerations in terms of putting a draft LEP on exhibition. So I can assure you I haven't been deceived.
Well, I'm sorry, you have been deceived because you weren't provided those numbers, and if you were, by another way, we've been deceived because it's not fair that you were given the numbers back in February or before or shortly after, and we weren't. And this whole number issue points to the fact that the foreshore scenic protection area is not being expanded as per the local strategic planning statement. The LEP is supposed to reflect what the locals want, what in that statement, and it doesn't. It's completely at odds because there's actually a net loss of 1,083 lots. This isn't an expansion. It's not even just a slight, reduction. It is a contraction. So,
Ms. Wagstaff,
I'll be right.
Your
Yes.
point is made. Can I ask you, are there any other elements of the LEP that you have comments about?
Yes, I have.
Foreshore scenic protection area.
Thank you. I've put them in my 23-page submission. So I sent you a summary of that submission a couple of days ago, which I hope you received. But we've only got a short time, and I picked out what I believe is the key issue for me personally, that we, the residents, have been deceived, and I believe you have. And if you don't think you've been deceived, well, then I'd stop. So this is a key figure. And why didn't council provide it to us in the first place? I received a letter from the general manager yesterday saying that it wasn't the rationale. I mean, I could read out the letter.
All right.
Here's the letter from the general manager yesterday I received. How the timing was just wonderful. I advise that the plan proposal report and its appendices do not make reference to this number as the rationale for the proposed amendments to the foreshore scenic protection area does not arise from any numerical count of the number of lots to be removed and or added. And it just goes on with some other stuff, which is really, I just don't think are relevant. So this was from the general manager yesterday, and I just find this all very, very worrying. So thank you very much for your time.
All right, hold on. I think Mr. Brockhoff wants to make another comment.
Thank you. I've got a question. How would you see the best way of giving effect in the LEP to the local strategic planning statement in relation to the foreshore protection issues?
Well, first thing, do not reduce the foreshore scenic protection area on this side, the Hurstville side. Keep it as it is because it has worked wonders for us for the last 20 odd years. Mm-hmm. It's given us a lot of protection. It's given our river protection, our foreshore protection, our resident protection. It's been wonderful. Why would council want to mess that up and replicate it over on the other side of Cogra? I know some people would say that it's already been ruined in part, but that doesn't matter. We can still keep what's good over there. And there are some very concerned residents over there on the other side, so don't reduce it. Council only needs, have only got a shortfall of about 2,000 dwellings, extra dwellings, by 2036. And this just looks to me like an easy option for the council. Oh, good, okay, we'll take this, so we'll decrease the subdivision lot requirement over on the Congress side, and we'll get 650 extra dwellings out of that. We've got the housing investigation areas, there's 5 of them. We'll get about 650, 700 extra dwellings out of that. Oh, wonder where else we'll go. Oh, look, foreshore scenic protection area, that looks in the Hurstville type, that looks an easy pickings. And as you would be well aware, or maybe you aren't aware, the housing strategies have not been adopted yet. And in there are lots of suggestions the way they can get extra dwellings. And why not wait till those 2 housing strategies have been adopted by the council, then go ahead with this LEP? And council's argument that, they've got to get it done by at the end of this month because of the funding agreement is flawed, very flawed. Council didn't follow the funding. They breached the funding agreement late last year, and they didn't get punished. They didn't lose any money out of it. And if they do lose any money, it'll be a maximum of $1.25 million. And I'm sure the ratepayers wouldn't object to paying that. So we get an LEP.
Could I ask you, just back on my question, could you, in relation to giving effect to the LSPS in relation to the foreshore protection area, are you saying that on the Congress side that the proposal does give, in your opinion, does give effect to the LSPS?
A little bit, yes, but it's only 1,297 residential zone lots. It's a small number. And the thing is, they should just leave, council should just leave the foreshore scenic protection area alone in our area. As I said, it served our community, our river, our foreshores very well, and just replicate it, do those sorts of things on the other side. Other people are, like Sharon Cullis, more aware of the ridge lines and all that, and follow her advice of where you go up to the ridge lines. The Foreshore Strategic Directions paper was a fantastic paper. It's become my Bible. It's wonderful. And our council's ignored a lot of the recommendations in that. Our council's ignored the issues and concerns of its own planning staff, its own environmental staff. I just don't know why council's doing this. It's so stupid.
All right, Ms. Wagstaff, we've got to move on. Thank you for your submission.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Next up, please. Take it, that's Mrs. Wagstaff's husband, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Oh, is that Mr. Wagstaff? Hello, Mr. Wagstaff, are you there?
Yeah, speaking.
Yes, hello. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make an oral submission about the draft LEP 2020. Can I say that we've just heard from your good wife a very detailed submission about the LEP, and can I also say that the submission that your wife made has been noted and read by the panel in relation to the environmental impacts as a result of the foreshore scenic protection area being reduced. So please note that and proceed.
Noted. Yes, today I'm representing the Ugly Flora and Fauna Conservation Society. We're a society of around 300 members who've been in existence since 1955 and have continued on to this day, caring for and protecting the environment. That's the background to my submission. I've heard what you've said. What I want to do today is just briefly address some of the contradictions and anomalies and then clarify our recommendations as a result of viewing the reports that you've got before you today and the options that are proposed.
Can I suggest that your wife has made a submission about the number of lots to be included and excluded? So can I ask that just don't be repetitive on those issues, because your wife has canvassed that quite well.
Well, I simply want to state that's my first point, that the balance of the lots left in the foreshore scenic protection area is reduced.
Yes.
And so it's clearly a contraction.
Yes.
It's not an expansion.
Yes.
So that's one of the first anomalies and contradictions that I'd like to make that I find in the report.
Thank you.
Another one is taking out 5% from the required landscaped area can be the difference between having trees and removing them. Cumulatively, that effect for hundreds of properties is significant, and this is directly contradictory to South District Planning Priority S15 for increasing urban tree canopy cover and delivering green grid connections. 3, Council has erroneously claimed this planning proposal will not adversely affect critical habitat, threatened species, populations or ecological communities or their habitats. Now that's on the contrary, we know from government databases that both threatened species and ecological communities are present. Urbanisation is a known key threatening process to threatened biodiversity. The fact that the Council simply ignores the impact of intensifying the threat to what we have left in our area is unacceptable. 4, Council has claimed in the FSPA frequently asked questions sheet that the FSPA is not a biodiversity provision. However, this disregards the outcome of the existing FSPA, which has the effect of protecting biodiversity by limiting the amount of built development which can occur in the existing Hurstville LEP 2012. The claim is also contradicted by clause 6.7 of the draft LEP 2020, where it notes that this existing FSPA provision has been modified for inclusion in the draft LEP 2020 to include additional considerations regarding the protection and maintenance of the biodiversity within the FSPA. So these are contradictory statements to what Council claimed was that it was not a biodiversity provision. 5, in the report you have before you today, it is revealed that the New South Wales Office of Environment, Energy and Science suggested the draft LEP should be amended to include a specific provision to protect biodiversity in the LGA and a biodiversity map. Council's response is to reject the first suggestion, and in relation to the second, that is the map, states it is yet to prepare an LGA-wide biodiversity study, but will be doing one sometime in the future. So where do we stand on that? 6, in a very recently published FAQ sheet, questions from digital webinars, Council states the Local Strategic Planning Statement 2040 commits to developing a biodiversity strategy informed by an LGA-wide biodiversity study. The outcomes of this study may result in biodiversity provisions included in a future LEP. The problem arising from this statement is if the current proposed changes to the FSPA are implemented immediately, impacting biodiversity detrimentally, and at some future date, a biodiversity study finds that biodiversity provisions are needed in the GRC LEP, it will be so much more difficult to not only undo the changed LEP provisions, but also to counter the impacts that have already been wrought on biodiversity. That is, the horse will have bolted. Now, options proposed, 3 options have been proposed to deal with the objections to the proposed FSPA reduction. They're outlined in the report, and option 1's preferred. Oatley Flora and Fauna remains opposed to the reduction of the FSPA boundaries on the former Hurstville side of the LGA and therefore rejects options 1 and 2. Future studies are most likely to confirm the biodiversity that is already recorded in the Bionet database and seen by the local community. Council therefore should adopt the precautionary principle at this stage and make no changes to the existing FSPA until at least the information is collected, analysed and publicly reported so decisions can be made in full knowledge of all the relevant information. Further, the biodiversity study or assessments should be LGA-wide as committed to in the local strategic planning statement, not just parks, foreshore areas, selected streets, as was recently announced only just last week that Council had some money to do a biodiversity study, but it was very limited in its perspective. So under the current or existing requirements for dual occupancies, the 25% requirement is still not adequate to achieve sufficient sites for deep soil planted mature trees. Further, any proposal to offset the loss of trees from lots, streets and gardens by planting in parks does nothing to improve canopy cover or vegetation/habitat connectivity or maintain scenic protection of vegetation throughout the LGA. OFF recommends increasing the landscaped area requirements for dual occupancies in the FSPA to 30%. Council states that it has done the modelling and can show that this percentage is quite achievable, so why not implement that? In recent news, only yesterday, the state government, the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment, released a draft Greener Places policy outlining guidelines for open spaces, including parks, sporting fields, open corridors and rooftop gardens. It will inform planning controls at every level of urban development across state and local government. So the planning guidelines emphasise the creation of a linked network of accessible recreational spaces, urban tree canopy and nurturing native habitats and ecological health within various urban and regional environments. So here we have the state government pushing councils to complete their LEPs at the very end of the process, coming out with new policies that will inform every level of development. It's very much policy on the run, and all the more reason to delay the approval of this LEP for Georges River Council until it can be fully informed by all the relevant studies and guidelines. In summary, of our recommendations, I'll just finish off with that. Off Oatley Flora and Fauna Conservation Society calls on the LPP, 1, to reject options 1 and 2. Off remains opposed to the reduction of the FSPA boundaries on the former Hurstville side of the LGA. 2, to make no changes to the boundaries of the existing FSPA under the Hurstville Local Environment Plan 2012 until at least the required biodiversity studies have been completed. 3, to require the biodiversity studies to be LGA-wide. And 4, in the interim, to support option 3 with an increase in the landscaped area requirements for dual occupancies in the FSPA from 25% to 30% as recommended in option 1. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wagstaff. Just firstly, can I ask that submission that I take it that you've been reading from a submission that you've prepared, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Has that been forwarded to the council?
No,
we
not at this
have a
stage.
number of them, but including the wives. But I'm just wondering, have you forwarded that submission that you have addressed this morning to the council?
No, I haven't. I didn't think I was required to. At that
you're
point,
not. I'm asking, Mr. Chair, I'm asking you whether or not you can. Are you in a position to forward it on?
Yes, I will. Yes.
All right.
Yes, I can do that.
Can you please
Certainly.
mark it to the attention of Ms. Merrill Bishop, please?
Yep, I can do that.
All right. Thank you. If you can do that sometime today, that would be appreciated.
Okay.
All right, now just hold on. I'll see if there are any questions in the panel. No, there's no further questions. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next submitter is Matthew Allison.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Hello, is that Mr. Allison? Hello, Mr. Allison, are you there?
I am, yes.
Thank you, sir. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission. Now, I understand that your submission is in relation to the Foreshore Scenic Protection Area reduction.
That's correct.
Can I inform you that the panel has been, comprehensively addressed on this issue. So the matters that you've raised, as I understand it, have been the remnant native trees and the loss of those trees, as well as the lot sizes and the native fauna impacts, have been thoroughly addressed by previous speakers. I don't want to cut you off. I'll allow you to make your submission, but can you please not repeat those things for us, because we've been inundated with submissions about those matters.
Okay, well, that's disappointing, because I've prepared my my speech to address all those.
Well,
so
are you in a position to?
I prefer to read it.
Are you in a position to summarise those matters, or how long will it take you to go through your submission?
Oh, about 4 minutes.
Okay, well, go ahead. That's fine.
Thank you. Okay, thanks. Well, good morning. My name is Matt Allison. I'm a resident in Lloyd Street, Aitley, and I wish to speak up for the silent sentinels in our suburb, remnant trees that I feel will be lost if this draft LEP 2020 is adopted. The proposal to remove the properties in Oatley, Lugano and Peakhurst areas from the historic Foreshore Scenic Protection Area will certainly severely impact remnant native vegetation, particularly the majestic blackbutts, Sydney red gums and grey gums that grace our garden suburb. My wife and I have lived in Oatley for the past 25 years and have raised our 2 daughters in the serenity of this nature haven. Indeed, the singular reason for purchasing a home in this area was related to the bushiness of the local environment, with its overstory of remnant native trees that have been lovingly preserved by previous generations. I've worked in the field of bush restoration for 30 years, and there is hardly a bush reserve in this LGA that I haven't rehabilitated in some form or another. I'm also an active member of the Georges River Council's volunteer bush care group, and by coincidence, just this morning, our team of Ollies have been hard at work restoring Buria Reserve next to Oatley train station. The Aboriginal word Buria refers to the remnant population of turpentine trees that occupy this reserve. Incidentally, this vegetation is representative of the endangered ecological community known as Sydney turpentine and ironbark forest, of which only 0.5%, 0.5% remains on Earth. Take a moment to absorb that salient figure, 0.5% remaining from what was once the forest that gave Forest Road its name. These remaining trees in Buria Reserve and the remnant trees throughout Oatley owe their longevity to the tenacity of the former Hurstville Council and now Georges River Council. The tree preservation orders and the tree management policies that were adjudicated by tree officers over decades saved many of these trees from wanton destruction. These trees also make up a green web of connectivity that allows for the free movement of remnant populations of native animals that manage in all adversity to hang on in the leafier suburbs. Bigger housing footprints that are de rigueur with building developers and well-heeled investors these days are rearing their ugly heads throughout our bushy suburb, and remnant trees have been felled to accommodate more hard surfaces. The hastily allotted 1050 bushfire clearing policy that affords no scrutiny, and now the advent of the no council approved necessary granny flat has succeeded on removing even more canopy trees from our suburb. But all this pales into insignificance with a proposal to reduce lot sizes and allow effectively dual occupancy throughout the amended FSPA. When one house block is occupied now by at least 2 houses, the amount of hard surfaces are effectively doubled and the deleterious effect of excavation compounds the situation. This will dramatically reduce remaining native vegetation cover and make it virtually impossible for even nature appreciating residents to grow a large tree on their property. Current trends in domestic architecture call for the need to excavate the building block to facilitate basements and swimming pools. Excavation will ensure the death knell of most remnant trees on sandstone substrate. If not in the initial phase to remove a tree from the footprint, then the subsequent damage to major tree roots and change drainage patterns that will either inundate a tree root zone or redirect flow away from the roots. Either way, a couple of years down the track, another remnant tree mysteriously dies. I hope I leave you with no hesitation that I believe the idea to bring former Hurstville Council residents in the historic FSPA on par with similar areas of the former Cogra Council LGA is a recipe for disaster for our natural environment, and the current connectivity of green corridors will be fragmented, adding to the demise of our remnant native fauna. I support option 3 in the local planning panel papers to leave the FSPA as currently defined, but add additional areas in the former Cogra LGA based on the presence of remnant native vegetation and the protection of vegetation along the Georges River. I'll leave you now to ponder on your responsibilities as architects of the future and ask yourselves, during these days of COVID-19 and with all the positive anecdotal evidence of people wanting to reconnect with nature, will there be any real health benefits from squeezing more anxious people into a finite space? And if we don't have our health, then what value on all of this? Thank you very much for listening.
All right, thank you, Mr. Allison. Just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions of the panel. Yes,
Sure.
Mr. Rahotas has a question for you.
Sure.
Thanks for your submission, Mr. Allison. Can I just confirm that you're a bush regeneration professional?
I am, yes.
And you've worked in the local government area for some time?
30 years, yes.
Are you familiar with one of the proposals that the council put forward in relation to tree protection and landscaping in residential areas?
You'd have to explain it, sorry.
So there is a proposal that has been put forward for the planning panel to consider with regard to before granting of any development consent, there needs to be consideration of the trees, the natural landscape, and also some quite in-depth consideration of the condition of the trees and the root zones of those trees. Do you have a view on whether that would be beneficial or otherwise?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit, but just on, do I have a what? Sorry, you broke up after that.
On whether that would be beneficial or otherwise for the LGA.
Look, it'd definitely be beneficial to have more studies done into the I guess the root zone of trees. When you excavate, you obviously change drainage patterns. Is that all taken into account with the approval of the dwelling? There's a lot at stake. We don't really know what's going on underneath the soil, you know, and when that gets changed, then remnant trees mysteriously die a few years down the track, just from, you know, changed drainage patterns and that sort of thing. So, I'd like to think that improvements were made, and I know that the administration within the tree management office do a great job, but they've got limitations on what they can approve and that sort of thing, I think.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing further. Thank you for your submission, Mr. Allison. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay,
have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Our next emitter is Julie Deedy.
Hello.
Hello, is that Miss Deedy? Hello. Miss Deedy, are you connected?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a oral submission about the LEP 2020. So please proceed.
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My area of interest is the proposed rezoning of 6 homes in Monaro Avenue, Kingsgrove. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes to speak to you all directly. Yesterday morning, you mentioned that the panel had made some site visits. Have you visited Peterlow Reserve?
Sorry, ma'am, repeat. Some site visits?
Have you? Yes. Yeah, I believe
Yes.
you've made some site visits. Have you
Yes.
visited Peterlow Reserve?
Yes.
You have? Oh, good, good. So firstly, I'd like to commend to the panel the removal of the proposed land acquisition of 11 to 21 Monaro Avenue as proposed in paragraph 143 of your agenda papers. I was pleased to hear the council has listened to communities' concerns and arguments and reconsidered this idea. This was never a planning proposal with merit. Council can only point to possible increases in housing density at some indeterminate time in the future in the local Kingsgrove Local Centre, all conditional on a future LEP we haven't seen yet. Why would council commit to spend $10 million of public money based on a series of possibilities? Peterlow Reserve is a long way from any possible suggested areas of future increased density. As Helen mentioned yesterday morning, it's 1.1 kilometres from the heart of Kingsgrove to the park entrance. Last week, after making my submission, I finally mapped the distance myself and confirmed the distance is 1.1 kilometre. Mea culpa, I'd previously been using a figure of 800 metres, which was given to me by a supporter. I notice the council now seems to be using that 800 metre figure. One lesson I've learned from this process is always check everything yourself. Just yesterday, the Department of Planning, Industry and Environment released its draft Greener Places policy. I quote from the Sydney Morning Herald's report, "Parklands and other open spaces should be within 200 metres of high-density homes and 400 metres from schools, and just let me turn the page over. Should be within 400 metres of schools and workplaces. While I haven't read the new guidelines yet, this fits neatly in line with the requirements in the South District Plan and the draft Open Space for Recreation Guide that high-density development should be located within 200 metres of high-quality open space. No amount of discussion will move Peterlow Reserve any closer to Kingsgrove. The Kingsgrove Local Centre straddles the border both with Bayside Council and Canterbury Bankstown Council. As Phil Henderson mentioned yesterday, there are a series of other parks much closer to the centre, between 100 and up to about 400 metres from the heart of Kingsgrove. Council never mentions these, presumably because they're mostly across the border, but residents will not be constrained by these borders and will use the nearest spaces. These parks are Kingsgrove Memorial Reserve, Dowsett Park, Kookaburra Park, Forester Reserve and a couple of pocket parks along the M5 Linear Park. The Linear Park itself, which provides great bike riding opportunities. An innovative approach would be for Georges River Council to work with the other councils to look at the opportunities in those areas as well as Smith Park, which is within our border. Surely we've moved on from silo thinking in our planning process. I also support Helen and Phil's analysis of the obvious differences in density and needs between the southern area and northern corner of the Hurstville ward. I'm very concerned about Council's claims that it needs 7.6 hectares of open space. This is incorrect. Just because someone wrote that in the LSPS doesn't make it so. The figure of 7.6 hectares actually refers to a shortfall of sports field playing surfaces and ancillary areas, as reported by the consultants in the Open Space Recreation Community Facilities Strategy 2019 to 36. This description morphed into open space when the LSPS was written, and now Council uses this to justify rezoning homes. Phil.
Hello, Ms. Gill. Sorry, you just momentarily dropped out there. Can you just repeat?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the description morphed into open space when the LSPS was written, and now Council uses this to justify rezoning homes. The real need is for playing fields, which Peterlow Reserve is never going to be able to fill. It's awkwardly shaped and is, as I'm sure you would have noticed when you visited. While Council has in the past couple of weeks made some suggestions as to possible improvements to the park, at the time the proposal was first made, the community was told repeatedly that there was no plan for the park. This certainly raised suspicions, but it also indicated the poor planning inherent in the proposal. If Council would like to increase usage of the park, I'd suggest the best way to do that would be consulting with the local community and improving the facilities based on that consultation. As mentioned by Esther yesterday, lack of shade over the equipment is a significant disincentive for families to use the space. People walk in to use the park from several blocks in all directions. This is especially obvious during the COVID isolation. Even though the playground was off limits, people still used the park for exercise and general quiet recreation. There's no need to increase the park's footprint to make it friendlier or more welcoming. Consultation and a small amount of money, maybe 10% of the cost of purchasing those homes, would do it. Overdevelopment of Peterlow Reserve will result in traffic issues. Council did not conduct any traffic studies before it unilaterally declared that McGregor Avenue would be suitable for on-street parking. In fact, I was told that by a council officer that no traffic studies were done because we were not in a housing investigation area. McGregor Street is narrow and surprisingly busy, with no footpaths and up to 12 cars parked there on a weekend. There are 5 driveways opening onto the street. Commuters and locals use it as a rat run every day. It's no place to be unloading children and bikes, etc. It's been mentioned by other speakers, and I understand that this is not within your remit, but I would also like to highlight the problems inherent in organising a residents' consultation and campaign during a pandemic shutdown. As Council had not notified the community of the rezoning, it fell to the affected residents to let as many locals know as possible, at a time when we're unable to gather even in small groups. Some members of the community have been severely disadvantaged by limited English, lack of computers, or unfamiliarity with technology. While I support removing the rezoning proposal from this LEP, I'm concerned at Council's suggestion to defer the land reservation until a future LEP. There are serious shortcomings in the proposal which will not be overcome merely by moving it into the future. Council needs to be innovative in its planning, not merely take a bit more space onto an existing park that's too far from existing or possible future high-density residents to be of real use. To conclude, I would ask that you approve the suggested change to the draft LEP to remove the rezoning of those 6 homes in Monaro Avenue, but I would also suggest the removal of all targeted references to Peterlow Reserve, and in particular, those 6 homes in future LEPs. I think Phil Henderson yesterday encapsulated my thoughts in his option 2.5. Yes, remove the rezoning of 11 to 21 Monaro Avenue. Allow individual homes anywhere in the LGA to be purchased on the open market with proper DA-style notifications. No forced acquisitions for open space, and all proposals should always be based on a broad examination of all options. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your submission, Ms. Deedy. I take it that your preferred option is a combination of option 2 and option 3, is it correct?
Well, that's probably a good way of putting it, yes. Those 6 homes should no longer be targeted as a potential spot for, well, no longer targeted any more than any other homes anywhere else in the LGA.
All right. Okay, I'll just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions from other panel members.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Levy has a question for you. Just hold on.
Just a quick question. Julie, could you confirm where your property is in relation to the park?
I back onto the park and I'm 2 down from, well, there's 1 between myself and the first affected property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nothing further?
Yep.
Thank you for your submission, ma'am.
Good. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Our next submitter is Vince Badalati, a councillor of the Georgia River Council.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Badalati, are you there?
Yes, I am.
you're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make an oral, or your oral submission about the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. So please proceed, sir.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity of being able to speak this morning. I want to speak in regards to 6 properties in Monaro Avenue at Kingsgrove. And I'd like to lend my support to the officer's preferred option to not list in the LEP for land acquisition, these 6 properties. I believe that there are other ways that the Pedalo Reserve can be opened up, and basically it's either on a voluntary basis of any of the owners around the park who may wish to sell their property to the council, or council just waits until the properties come onto the market and they can then purchase. I believe that the land acquisition is the very last option that should be looked at. And there are, as I said before, there are other ways of acquiring property. And in the meantime, I believe better signage around the park would open it up. I also believe that council needs to improve the facilities within the park. At the moment, it's a fairly bare park with just a little playground area. I believe things like an adventure playground, a walking track, and any ideas that the local community may have to improve the park so that more and more people can use it. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning. And as I said, I support the preferred option of the officers in not listing in the LEP the 6 properties for land acquisition. Thank you.
All right, just thank you. Just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions from the panel.
Yep, sure.
There's nothing arising. Councillor, I can indicate to you that as a document that I've been provided is a open space concept design of which Pedalo Reserve is mentioned, and it gives some ideas as to how you can improve the amenity of the park and upgrade the facilities on it.
Yeah.
Would commend that.
Look, I think it's quite important that the local community be consulted on that, because they may come up with some very good ideas as well. It's good that there is a what's the word I'm looking for? A plan set out for Pedalo Reserve to improve it, but I believe, the consultation with the local community may come out with a better option.
All right, thank you. One of our expert members, Mr. Levy, also has a comment. Can you just hold the line, please?
Thanks, Councillor. I appreciate your thoughts on the supply of open space within the ward, and particularly opportunities to provide open space for future housing in the area and future growth?
Yes. Look, on the other side of the railway line in Beverly Hills, we have Beverly Hills Park, which provides 2 or 3 football fields. But beside that park, there is an industrial area, and some of that, the owners are trying to sell properties there because they say it's just not viable for them anymore. And I believe green space could be increased significantly in that area. On the same side as Monaro, well, it's an area that is built up fairly extensively, apart from Hurstville Oval and Timothy Reserve. There is another area off Thomas Street that's fairly wide open. Now, a road goes right around the reserve there, but something could be done there to improve facilities. Another park is in one street off Patrick Street. I can't remember the name of the street. But that isn't used much at all as well. Once again, I believe things can be done in that park to improve the facilities and make it better for the local community around that park. In terms of new areas, I mentioned the industrial area on the other side of the railway line. And there's really not much else.
Okay, no, thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Councillor, for your submission.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is James Daly.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Hello, is that Mr. Daly? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Daly.
Hello?
Yes, you're before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission in relation to the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. I understand that your concerns relate to the decrease of the foreshore scenic protection area. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Can I suggest to you that the panel has heard over the past 2 days?
Yes, yes. I've only got. It's only going to take 3 minutes.
Yes, we've heard exhaustive submissions, very comprehensive submissions about this particular topic.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I note that you have provided a submission, a written submission to the council. Consider that to be read. Is there anything else you'd like to address us on?
It's more about governance, really.
Pardon me, sir?
It's more about governance.
All right.
So if I can, I'll quickly just read. Am I ready to go?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is James. I live in Oatley. I've been here for 18 years. So look, my main concern centres on the poor level of governance by council in not only its preparation of the planning proposal, but in its failure to follow due process with it and throughout the public exhibition also. In fact, I had to contact council yesterday as it had failed to give me a time to present to the panel, and I seriously hope that no other residents will similarly be ignored. My main concern goes further than the Council's plainly erroneous claim that no endangered species will be impacted in regards to the FSPA. There is also a threat to human life, as Council has not considered DPIE's standards for bushfire protection, i.e. to protect life, property and the environment from bushfire hazards by discouraging the establishment of incompatible land uses in bushfire-prone areas, and to encourage sound management of bushfire-prone areas. Humans may not yet be endangered species, but they will certainly be impacted if this LEP is approved, as much of the FSPA is bushfire affected, as proven by Council's own bushfire-prone land maps. The planning proposal also does not meet DPIE's criteria in that it hasn't referenced the significant environmental studies in Council's possession, i.e. the Herschel Biodiversity Study, Kogarah Flora and Fauna Study of the vegetation maps, which it is commissioned itself. It went as far as actually refusing to release them to residents who requested them for submission purposes. Through contracting the FSPA by almost 1,100 properties, Council has broken Ministerial Direction 2.1 Environmental Protection, which aims to protect and conserve environmentally sensitive areas. Council's contention that the current FSPA safeguards only scenery and not the environment is another falsehood. The affected FSPA, particularly from Mortdale Heights through to Riverwood, is relatively remote from urban centres and inadequately serviced by bus routes, necessitating the use of cars, yet inexplicably, Council has not addressed public transport and traffic either. As evidenced by Councillor Lansbury yesterday, it is unacceptable that management failed to inform councillors on the full ramifications of the draft LEP. In fact, Council did not tell the public about the 2,400 properties being removed until a resident suggested this fact should be made available to the public midway through the exhibition period. It is failing to deliver the expanded FSPA, which was promised only last year in its Local Strategic Planning Statement 2040. I believe that option 3 should be adopted, as it leaves the former Herschel FSPA intact and extends those safeguards into the old Kogarah LGA as well. Failing that, I contend that a public hearing should be held under Section 57 of the Act to investigate all of the above matters, as well as other deficiencies since the process began, which has impacted other aspects of the draft, such as resumptions of the homes and changes of high density areas. For example, drip feeding of information to the public over the course of the exhibition period, inability to answer questions at the webinars, the provision of inaccurate mapping, admissions by staff that they had not visited the affected areas, and discrimination against those without internet from the NESB background and critical information inaccessible. Also, due to the increased private certification, Council no longer actively polices landscape plans for new developments, so the trees promised by the DA applicant rarely eventuate. As an avid environmentalist, I chose to live on a 1,000 square metre block simply because it includes several mature trees, which is habitat to native wildlife, so I have no desire whatsoever to develop it. Finally, Mr. Curray, State Member of Oatley, has told us that the LGA has met its housing target. However, Council has failed to justify to the community why the extra housing is being pushed at the expense of the environment. Council has not explained any benefits whatsoever arising from the slashing of the foreshore protection area. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Delly. Just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions for the panel. Yes, Mr. Levy has a question for you.
Just very quickly, you were talking about the bushfire concerns and incompatible uses. Are you referring to dual occupancies there?
Correct.
Thank you.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Delly.
Thank you. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Our next submitter is Amy Vaughan.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Ms. Vaughan, are you there? Hello, Ms. Vaughan, are you there?
I am. Hello. Good morning, council and panel members. And can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're currently before the panel, the Georges River Local Planning Panel, to make a submission, so please proceed.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And I'm speaking on behalf of my client, who's the Ryder family, and they are the owners of a land holding on Forest and Boundary Road within Peakhurst. The site is located to the immediate east of the Peakhurst Local Centre. On behalf of my client, we do not agree with the proposed delaying of changes to planning controls for the Peakhurst Local Centre and our client's landholding until the 2022 LEP, which is referenced in Table 5 of the LEP planning proposal. We believe that proceeding with the planning proposal for this site ahead of this is not inconsistent with Council's own planning outcomes for Peakhurst. As far as we are aware, and so there's little risk in doing it beforehand. For example, it is in line with the Economic Development Strategy, Georges River Employment Land Study, Council's Community Strategic Plan, the District and Region Plans, and also the LSPS recognises Peakhurst as a centre for potential expansion. So again, today on behalf of my client, I'm requesting Council to include our client's landholding within the 2020 LEP to provide an extension of the Peakhurst B1 local centre. This proposal is not like other spot rezonings, and we believe the Peakhurst local centre is not like other centres. Our client's landholding and the adjoining School of Arts would make a logical extension of the local centre. This landholding is currently the only residential landholding within the local centre strip, which adjoins industrial land, and so it could be considered as an isolated lot. We appreciate the Council has shown support for the rezoning of this site through discussions we've had regarding our client's planning proposal. However, we believe that the most time and cost efficient means for the rezoning of this site would be through Council's own 2020 LEP process. And this would provide wider public benefits, increase employment opportunities, and contribute to boosting the local economy. The redevelopment of the site has potential to act as a catalyst for the urban renewal of the local centre. The Peakhurst North area, which is to the north of our client's site, has experienced a significant increase in residential density over the past years, following Council rezoning this area to medium density housing. So we believe an expanded and improved Peakhurst local centre is needed now to support this increased population, and it can't wait till the 2022 LEP to provide services required for this population within a walkable distance. And furthermore, we note that the 2020 LEP intends to amend controls for the Peakhurst industrial area, which adjoins our client's landholding, to allow for increased density. So this will mean more workers needing nearby services, which are lacking in the current Peakhurst local centre. So again, another reason why the expansion of this Peakhurst local centre makes sense as part of the 2020 LEP. Studies have been prepared on behalf of our client that demonstrate there is already a need for additional commercial space at this location, and that it will support the role of Peakhurst. And we believe the lengthy planning proposal route, along with the potentially loss of value capture for our client, is a deterrent to development. And as a side note, we also request Council to review the value capture levy, which can adversely impact on development feasibility. The removal of this levy will promote development, which is needed particularly in the current economic situation. And so in summary, my client's landholding provides the potential to make a significant contribution to the role of Peakhurst local centre, and this can be done, we believe, in a way that is completely consistent with Council's own planning. So on behalf of my client, again, thank you panel members for listening today.
All right, just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions.
Thank you.
No, we don't have any questions. Thank you for your submission.
Thank you, Council and Planning members, panel members.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Our next submitter is Graham Lacheri. Hello. Hello, is that Mr. Lacheri? Hello.
Hello.
Hello, is that Graham Lacheri? It doesn't sound like Graham Lacheri.
Mr. Chair, the call dropped out. I will try again.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the call is connected.
Thank you. Is that Graham Lacheri? Hello.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Lacheri, you're before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make an oral submission on the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. I understand that your topic is the Foreshore Scenic Protection Area. Is that correct, sir? Hello.
Yes, Graham Lalsey here.
Yes, thank you. You're currently before the panel. Would you like to make your submission?
Sorry, there was a bit of a... yes, I would, thank you. My name is Graham Lalsey. I'm a retired engineer, a local resident who appreciates the value of trees and biodiversity. Therefore, I object to the removal of 2,380 properties from the current Personal Scenic Foreshore Protection Area in the draft LEP in Oatley, Peak, Ursa, Lugano. The LEP should adopt option 3, but also include the proposed landscaping requirements in option 1. I do agree, though, with the proposal to add properties in the former Cogger area, although this area should be wider than that proposed, not just immediate waterfront properties to fulfil its city gains from the river. So, as you've requested, I won't go into a lot of detail now. There are also more qualified people than me to speak about a lot of these details. But I would like to ask, though, if the planners have actually visited the area proposed to be removed from the FSPA. If so, they would have seen the extent of the area in question and why residents are so opposed to its removal from the FSPA. I also question who council is planning for, the existing residents, future residents or developers. From point 114 in the agenda papers, it mentions the benefit from greater developer potential. Well, it appears to be the developers. I certainly hope this is not the case, particularly given the standard of recent developments in our area. Little heed appears to be given to trees and biodiversity, particularly of the native variety. All I can see is that the FSPA would be reduced to the same low standard seen elsewhere. I'd like to make some comments now about the new local provision in clause 6.19, tree protection and landscaping in zones R2 and R3. This will be most welcome. It appears that much of this has been taken from the tree management policy. However, it appears to be in contravention of this policy. In part, policy states in clause 4.2, development and trees in planning the design of a development, consideration must be given to trees on the subject site and on the adjoining land. Elements to consider include, and one of the points is, existing prominent trees to be retained and incorporated as part of the design within an enforceable tree protection zone, being 12 times the trunk diameter when measured at 1.4 metres from ground level. Clause 6.19 states that existing trees on the site and any adjoining land can be retained. So no mention of prominent trees and not should be retained as it says in the tree management policy. And this then leads me to my next issue, landscaping. Even if the improvements proposed in option 1 are applied to option 3, the areas left for landscaping will be too fragmented, particularly in dual occupancies, and will not allow enough contiguous space for substantial plantings. Even current developments in the FSP have difficulty complying. Remember, the tree management policy states that during development, trees are to have a protection zone of 12 times the diameter at breast height. How will this be achieved if there's barely any room being left for landscaping? And I note that even council themselves have difficulty complying with this particular requirement, as evidenced by the street treater outside the Oakley West Early Childhood Centre. And certified don't appear to be too diligent in this regard. So now, just going back to biodiversity, if I may, I would just like to say that people aren't the only inhabitants of the FSPA. There are a myriad of animals living in them. Every time a tree or a landscape is destroyed, these animals are killed. There is no other way to describe it. They live there and their home and food source is destroyed. And you will be surprised how many animals live in the biodiversity FSPA. We have a community member who photographs birds in the area, and I'm continually surprised at the number of birds he finds, particularly in Oakley Park, of course, as that's where a lot of them live in that large area. But they also require the trees in the foreshore protection area and further afield in the LGA, not only as a food source and to nest, but to range widely, so they're used as corridors. And one last point I'd like to make is that point 97 in the agenda papers talks about a gradual take-up rate of dual occupancies in the FSPA. I think this is a specious statement. There may be a low rate of take-up, which I doubt, but the eventual result will still be devastation of the biodiversity. Besides, if the planners think there will be such a low rate of take-up, why do it? Other larger developments will no doubt make up any so-called minor additions to the housing stocks. So therefore, I request that the LEP process be postponed until
Are you there, sir? Hello, are you there, sir? Mr. Lecheri, are you there? Can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Lecheri. Hello.
I am, yes.
Sorry, the last minute we couldn't hear of your speech.
How far?
Mr. Lecheri, are you there? Can you hear me? You may need to, are you talking through the web or are you on a mobile phone?
I'm on a mobile, yes.
Okay, you may need to go to another room. Hello.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Are you able to talk to us now?
I can. Yes. Yes.
All right. Can you just repeat the last minute or so of your speech?
Okay. So, did you hear the tree management policy?
Got to the bit about the biodiversity consideration.
Oh, okay. Going back to biodiversity.
Mm.
I'd just like to say that people aren't the only inhabitants of the FSPA. There's a myriad of animals living in them. Every time a tree or a landscape is destroyed, these animals are killed. There's no other way to describe it. They live there, and their home and food source is destroyed. And you would be surprised how many animals live in the biodiversity of the FSPA. We have a local community member who photographs birds in the area, and I'm continually surprised at how many birds he finds in the area.
Yeah.
Particularly in Oakley Park, of course, but that's not in the FSPA. But these birds also live in the surrounding areas, not only living in them, but feeding in them and using the FSPA as corridors to access other large areas. So And I also mentioned point 97 in the agenda paper.
Yep.
It talks about a gradual take-up rate. I think this is a rather specious statement. There may be a low rate of take-up, which I doubt, but the eventual result will be devastation of the biodiversity. Besides, if the planners think there will be such a low take-up rate, why do it? Other larger developments will no doubt make up any so-called minor addition to the housing stock. So therefore, I request that the LEP process be postponed until a biodiversity study is carried out. The next few years will see a drop in demand for housing as population increases slow down due to reduced migration as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic surge, allowing time for the study to take place. So I request that you go for option 3 with the addition of the landscaping requirements from option 1 for the FSPA. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions of panel members. No questions. Thank you for your submission today, sir.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to address the panel.
Our pleasure.
Okay, bye.
Our next submitter is Vicky Bolin.
Hello.
Hello, is that Vicky Bolling? Hello, Miss Bolling, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make an oral submission about the draft LEP 2020. I understand that your topic is the foreshore scenic protection area. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Can I suggest to you that we've heard quite a number of submissions over the past 2 days in relation to this topic?
Yes, I think you've been inundated.
Yes, I think that's probably the proper word for it, and we're fully conversant with the concerns of the neighbourhood issues down there, and certainly what the community is suggesting to us about the reduction of the foreshore scenic.
I can try to summarise what I'd like to say.
All right,
that's all right.
Good. Thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. Okay. Yes, well, I am opposed to the foreshore protection reduction, of course, and I would like to see it reintroduced into the former Cogwell Council as well. So obviously that means I would favour option 3. I'm sure you've heard some very scientific and environmental expert people, but I'd just like to give a layman or layperson's perspective, if that's all right.
Yes.
So in 2012, Hurstville City Council put in place the foreshore protection area as it was deemed essential to protect the scenic beauty of the foreshore as viewed from the river. That's what we were told during the webinar. So my point would be, if it was worth protecting then, it is worth protecting now. If in fact it's even more important or more necessary because of the ongoing loss of tree canopy that we've been getting already. I'll just give us the situation as it is now. The new homes that are being built around all of our suburbs, from Lagana to Oatley, including Peakhurst, they're much bigger than they were. The houses are much bigger. We have more dual occupancies. The homes occupy much more of the block than they used to. They're being built on steeper slopes than they used to be built. There's more excavation. There's a lot more runoff and removal of topsoil. So there's been a greater loss in tree cover overall. And the trees that are being removed are not being replaced. In fact, the new homes don't really have room to plant a tree. The landscaping we do get is minimal at best. The planning laws at present are often not followed by developers. DA requirements are not complied with, and the penalties for the infringements are minor. So the planning laws need to be more vigorously enforced, because it just exacerbates what's going on at the moment. The 2020 draft Georges River LEP proposes to, or purports to be, enhancing environmental protection, including the riparian lands, the watercourses and the foreshore scenic protection areas. So removing the foreshore protection area is not going to be enhancing the environmental at all. We've been told that Council wants to increase the tree cover across the whole LGA and to encourage and maintain wildlife corridors. Reducing the foreshore protection area just flies in the face of that. Once the trees are removed, as I said, they never return. Some of the trees that have been removed are easily over 60 years old, and as there's actually not space to plant a tree, these mature tall trees never return, and they're the ones that provide habitat for birds and other wildlife, and they're just disappearing across the whole LGA. One of Council's overarching principles was to retain controls where the status quo can be maintained. Well, they can retain the foreshore protection area as it is. Some of the other principles were to protect the amenity and the local character of low-density residential areas. Reducing the foreshore protection area will not do that. They wanted to enhance and protect the natural environment, especially in the foreshore localities along the Georges River. Again, if you take away the foreshore protection area, you won't do that. Now, from the water, looking towards both the north and the southern shores of the Georges River, so including the Sutherland Shire, you can see these large inappropriate developments where there's no landscaping between the separate houses. They continue up the slope, they break into the ridgeline, and the whole scenery is being destroyed by these huge blocks with little landscaping. It's just house next to another large house. So the view is being permanently spoilt. Okay? And we don't want to see any more of this type of development along the Georges River in either Kogarah or Hurstville. Council implied that for Kogarah to receive some of the foreshore protection area, you'd have to remove 2,380 homes from the old Hurstville side, and they would be replaced with 1,297 on the Kogarah side. So that's a net loss, but it also implied that if Kogarah was to receive some of the foreshore protection area, Hurstville would have to give it up. You're sort of pitting one suburb against another, and that isn't what we want to see. We don't want to see them robbing Peter to pay Paul. We also have to know what we are actually trying to protect, and without the biodiversity map, you won't know. The Office of Environment, Energy and Science recommended that a biodiversity map be added. We now hear that Council's going to do that, but it's not going to happen until September. So by then, the LEP will be in place, and so that will be too late.
All right.
Now, all of the foreshore along the Georges River should have equal importance and protection. So, especially if Council is true to its aim to increase tree cover and green corridors. So we'd like to see the foreshore protection area expanded in the Kogarah side and maintained in the Hurstville side. What they intended as a 40-metre foreshore protection zone is just way too small, and that should be measured from the high water mark. Council also stated that one of their reasons was to increase the population or to cater for population increase in the area. But again, we don't know how many people would take up those ideas of dual occupancies. And even if there are only a few each year, as Council said may happen, but we can't be sure, a few trees every year is just death by 1,000 cuts. It's a gradual fragmentation of the wildlife corridor. The EES also said that the Council should amend their LEP to not only protect, but to improve biodiversity and the remnant native vegetation. So you won't improve things if you remove the foreshore protection area or if you reduce the foreshore protection area. So that's sort of basically what I'd like to say, because I have summarised it somewhat for you. Right. But could I just quickly tell you something that happened by coincidence to me on Sunday? I just happened to be walking home. There were people walking in our street, because there's a lot of people walking around now because of the COVID shutdowns, etc. And this couple were new to the suburb, and they said how lovely it was to walk around through the green streets with all the trees and lovely gardens. I only got talking to them because we had all stopped to look at some birds feeding in a neighbour's tree. These new people didn't know what the bird was, I was able to tell them it was a yellow-tailed, glossy black cockatoo. They'd never seen it before and didn't know what it was. It was only there because they were feeding in my neighbour's banksia tree. They come often because that tree flowers every year. That's the example of a wildlife corridor. That house is in the foreshore protection zone, which was going to, or could be removed if council goes ahead with these changes. So that was a prime example of what we see in this suburb and how the birds and the native wildlife rely on these wildlife corridors to survive. So that's basically what I would have to say, and I thank you for your time.
All right, just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions. Firstly, whereabouts are you?
I'm in Oatley West.
Oatley West. All right. Are there any questions, panel? There's no questions, ma'am. Thank you very much for your submission.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Our next submitter is Alex Lynn.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Lynn, are you there? Hello, Mr. Lynn.
G'day.
Good morning, sir. You're before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission in relation to the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. And I understand that your concerns relate to the acquisition of land in Kingsgrove. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Can you please proceed?
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen on the panel. I'm Alex. I'm the resident of 21 Monaro Avenue, Kingsgrove, and I'm one of the houses that is in the zone for the planned rezoning and acquisition to make more public open space. Now, first of all, I would like to acknowledge the steps taken by the council to put forward an amendment option to the LEP to remove the land reservation acquisition of the 6 houses in Monaro Avenue. But having read through that option, it just concerns me that every subsequent details behind the first line goes back to a possible future rezoning and acquisition of the 6 houses that is proposed in the first draft of the LEP. And I would just like to say that all of the residents together are very against this idea of the council buying, of the council rezoning and trying to buy our land. And I was just wondering if it's possible that we have the Monaro Avenue rezone and acquisition removed from the LEP completely.
All right, so that's adopting option 3. That's your position?
No, that is actually not option 3, because in option 3, it says to abandon all open space acquisition, which is not what we want. We just want Monaro to be taken off.
Right, okay. So, yes, I'll qualify.
Yep.
That it means abandoning the proposed acquisition of the land in Monaro Avenue.
Yes, that is what we, the 6 homeowners, would want. And as you can see from the online petition that we have going, it's the wishes of a lot of the local community as well. I think at last check, we have over 1,300 signatures in support of the homeowners to get this removed from the LEP.
Okay. Do you have anything further for us?
No, that pretty much addressed my concerns for the amendments.
All right. I'll just see if there are any questions for the panel.
Okay.
There's no further questions. Mr. Lin, thank you for your submission. Duly noted.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We'll take a short adjournment and resume at 11:30. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Georges River Local Planning Panel meeting of the 26th of June 2020. This is the resumption of the meeting. We have Mr. Zach Zavarev as our next submitter.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Zavarev, are you there?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Zavarev. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission on the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. Please proceed.
Sure, thank you. Could you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, we're residents of Oatley West from Foreshore area, and we basically wanted to give our view, which is in support of the draft LEP 2020 and the proposed changes.
Yes. Can I suggest to you that we've heard quite a number of submissions on this particular topic?
Sure.
But please proceed.
So I'll go ahead. Yeah. So I'll go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah. We despite us being frontline health workers during COVID-19, but we really gave a lot of time reading the supporting documents in details. We've spoken to the strategic team over the phone, and we, seeking answers for some of our questions, and also attended the webinars, 2 of them. And, we believe the changes will actually enhance the area. We understand there's some concerns about biodiversity, traffics. Only 700 lots, including mine, become but eligible, if I could use that word, for dual occupancies. That, majority of my neighboring houses, they've got brand new houses on the lot if they are qualified after the changes. So not many will tend to dual diagnosis, but we want to have that option for future, so our children and family could live nearby, close to CBD and jobs and employment and amenities. So we're totally in support of the changes. We also believe, they're supporting acts on policies to address the concerns, including the tree policy, the independent review by the external architect. Mm-hmm. So we think the changes will actually enhance the area. That's all my input,
So, Mr. Zavarev, what you're suggesting is that the reduction of the foreshore scenic protection area you're in favour of. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely. It's only 7. I understand 2,380 will be removed across all the suburbs. And my understanding is only 700 become, dual occupancies lots. In my area, the lots of lots, they've got brand new houses on them, which is worth $2 or $3 million. So it's not really worth changing the dual diagnosis. So there will be probably a very minimal number that will change to dual occupancies in the future. But we do like to have that option so we could live near our family. My brother is a GP and works in Western Sydney. Sorry, he lives in Western Sydney because he couldn't get a house near us, and he works in St. George area. So he's in traffic 3-4 hours a day. He could see about 10 patients a day extra and pay more taxes.
Sorry, this is your son. Is that correct?
No, my brother, younger brother. I was fortunate because I was older. I was assisted by my family.
Right.
The younger one, there wasn't much money left to be given to him to buy something and have deposits. So he bought something near Parramatta.
All right.
But preferably he would have loved to live close to us. So the dual occupancy would give us an option in the future.
All right. Okay. Is that the extent of your submission, sir?
Yes, that's all it is. Yeah.
All right. Just hold on and I'll see if there are any questions from the panel. Yes, Ms. Rahotas has a question for you.
Thank you.
Just a simple question. What street do you live in, please?
Marine Drive.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Zavro. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your time, and thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Our next submitter is David Penglaze.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Penglaze, are you there? Hello, Mr. Penglaze.
Yes, it is.
Yes, you're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission on the Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. Please proceed.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to voice our objection to the proposed rezoning of the Esplanade Mall block, which I'm sure you understand is the block that consists between Connells Point Road, the Mall, Tavistock Street and the Esplanade where I live at number 9. Now, I'm speaking on behalf of my wife Liz and myself, and I also have letters of authorisation to represent our neighbours Rob and Diane Brown at number 11 and Steve and Susan Veritzis at number 10, the Esplanade. Now, I know the panel will have received representation from a number of other of our neighbours in the Esplanade Mall block, and while I'm sure the panel members have read my submitted letter of opposition to the rezoning of the Esplanade Mall block to R4, I'd like to take this time to first revoice the important history of our community's opposition to this rezoning. Let me start with the result of our wonderfully positive democratic process where we as a community objected to the original Cogra Council draft LEP rezoning of the Esplanade Mall block from R2 to R312. Now, the 15 councillors who voted on the previous LEP submission were unanimously opposed to the rezoning of the Esplanade Mall block. In fact, during the extraordinary council meeting, all councillors agreed that the Esplanade Mall block should never have been included for rezoning in the first instance, and that this block is extremely important to the character of our community for it to remain low-density residential. Now, the council, including departmental leadership, unanimously agreed and accordingly removed the Esplanade Mall block from rezoning. Our New South Wales Member of Parliament, Mark Curry, was highly opposed to the rezoning and made representation to the council, as did our Federal Member of Parliament, the Honourable David Coleman. However, a bureaucrat or public servant in the New South Wales Department of Planning overruled the residents, the councillors, the council and New South Wales and Federal Members of Parliament. Public servants substituted their own decision and rezoned without consultation the Esplanade Mall block from R2 to R312. This decision was totally contrary to the result of the due diligence that had concluded and endorsed by Council and the community. This was a procedural breach and an undemocratic ruling. Let me restate that the original decision to not proceed with rezoning the Esplanade Mall block had and still has the support of our community and the Honourable David Coleman and Honourable Mark Curry. who I can provide letters of support that they have provided us with. So that's the history. And now we, as a community, have discovered under this new Georges River Council draft LEP, any blocks zoned R312 have been automatically rezoned R4, and that includes, of course, the Esplanade Mall block. What that means is under the draft LEP 2020, the Esplanade Mall block is in reality being rezoned from our original zoning of R2 to R4. And this is inconsistent with Council's strategy of step zoning. Even on Council's website, the intra-map of the planned rezoning shows the rezoning of the Esplanade Mall block is totally inconsistent with the immediate surrounding areas that have been zoned R39. I respectfully ask the panel to seriously explore why the Esplanade Mall block is so obviously being singled out in this rezoning to R4. We are asking for a rezoning back to R2, but at the very least, from a consistency point of view, at worst, it should be rezoned R39 and not R4. I would also respectfully suggest that if the panel members personally visited the Esplanade Mall block between the hours of 8 and 9 in the morning or 2:30 and 3:30 in the afternoon on any day, Monday to Friday, it's just one big traffic jam. And with all the streets around our block full of cars going to and from school drop-off and to work. And this proposed rezoning will dramatically increase traffic, and it's just going to be dangerous and unworkable. Now, my final point is that I attended one of the Council's live-to-air webinars on the rezoning, where I voiced my concern and was told that Council has no provision to be able to rezone to a lower zoning. Now, I'm sure the panel members are aware that this is not the case. There is no legal or procedural reason that would restrict this, and in fact, now with the draft LEP, this is the perfect time to do so. This draft LEP review proposal is the perfect opportunity and most appropriate mechanism for Georges River Council to resubmit the Esplanade Mall block as low-level residential, consistent with the outcome of the previous Council's due diligence process as supported unanimously by Council, Councillors, New South Wales and federal MPs, as well as the express support of the then New South Wales Planning Minister, Anthony Roberts. In summary, we believe the rezoning of the Esplanade Mall block is undemocratic, in procedural breach, is not aligned with Council's own stepped approach to zoning, and certainly ignoring the concerns of we the neighbours, those of us who have established our lives in this lovely low-rise residential community. I respectfully ask the panel to seriously consider these reasons and the submissions and representations by others in our community to rezone the Esplanade Mall block back to its original R2 zoning, or if we must, to at least an R39, and certainly not proceed with the current draft rezoning of R4. Thanks for the opportunity to present to you, the members of the panel.
All right, Mr. Penglass, just hold on and I'll see if there are any questions that the panel may have for you.
Sure.
No, we don't have any questions, but thank you for your submission and thank you for your written submissions as well. They will be read and considered.
Yeah, thanks very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Our next submitter is Kim Hinchy.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Hello, is that Kim Hinchy?
Yes. Hello?
Hello, ma'am. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission in relation to the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. I understand you want to address us on the acquisition of land at Kingsgrove. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Yes, please proceed.
Yeah, look, just so we're located on 15 Monaro Avenue. So one of the houses that was proposed for was acquisition by council, and upon consultation with council, and so what we understand is that they were looking at increasing green space and also to increase public visibility to the park, so hence the acquisition of the 6 houses that includes ours. But from consultations, I didn't feel like that proposal seemed feasible in terms of costing and the arguments regarding providing more visibility to the park. And I guess there's a few points that have been made previously that the cost of that could potentially be used elsewhere where it's more needed and it's more reflective of the objectives of the LEP, which is to increase green space around high density area, whereas where we are, it's not. And also with the recent consultation with the GM, you know, we were basically made aware that, you know, there's a requirement to provide green space within 800 metres to, you know, high density area or to the general public in the ward. And I'm looking at the map and the location of where we are. I think from what I can see, the area that requires, you know, green space is probably somewhere towards, you know, Beverly Hills more so than our park. And also with the reserve that's currently existing behind our house, it works perfectly fine. I know that they are currently being used by the local schools, Kingsgrove Public School, Kingsgrove High School. A lot of the residents around the area know of the reserve and they currently use it. So I didn't think that acquiring our houses will increase the capacity that's required under the LEP, and I guess the cost of that doesn't really be reflective of you know, what that reserve can actually deliver. So I guess that's just really my point regarding that acquisition.
All right, thank you. I'll see if there are any questions to the panel. No questions. Thank you, ma'am, for your submission.
Thank you.
Moving to our next submitter, it is either Andrew or Gillian Baker.
You have read.
All right, we might just leave that one in abeyance and move to the next submitter, which is Councillor Leisha Payor.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Councillor Payor, are you there? Hello, Councillor Payor, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission in relation to the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. And rest assured, we've read your submission that's been received, but please proceed.
Thank you. I was elected to Georges River Council in September 2017 to represent Kogarah Bay Ward, and I'll limit my comments to issues that weren't covered in yesterday's submissions. The draft LEP to harmonise the previous LEPs for Hurstville and Kogarah for the new council, I believe, has brought 400 submissions. The previous LEP for Kogarah alone had amendments to upzone vast areas and remove its foreshore protection entirely, and it brought over 2,000 submissions. With that level of objection, I'm appealing to the panel to carefully study and amend the translation of the former Kogarah LGA's previously zoned R3 areas with a height of 12 metres or greater to a R4 high-density residential zoning. These areas along the Princes Highway and the King George's Road were zoned under the previous LEP as R3 because they are not suited to be R4, despite the height and density given to them. They are surrounded by R2 low density and not in locations that support R4 high density zoning. They are also controlled by a medium density DCP. They can remain an R3 anomaly. If they are renamed as R4, they need to retain the uses of the previous R3 zoning as per the only specific neighbour notification received for these upzonings back in 2014. The renaming should not impose changes of use that are incompatible with the surrounding areas. Likewise, further permitted use changes proposed are to the B6 Enterprise Corridor Zone to permit function centres and small bars. We're surrounded by R2 low density zoning. This is not suitable use and should be deleted. With reference to Jubilee Oval and Cogra Park, this is Crown land, and the recent changes to Crown land management has meant that since the 1st of July 2018, councils who manage Crown land have been required to manage that land as if it were classified as community land under the Local Government Act. Therefore, Jubilee Oval and Cogra Park now requires a plan of management. The permitted uses will be determined by the statutory process of community consultation and public hearings as part of adopting a plan of management, which is required before the 30th of June 2021. That's just 1 year from now. With recent expansions of the Act allowing leases and licences to be granted for up to 21 years in this initial period awaiting Crown land plans of management, I consider it imperative that the panel consider Section 44 of the Local Government Act, which expresses an absolute ban on changing the nature and use of community land until a plan of management is in place. I'm requesting the proposed changes to allow entertainment facilities as a permitted use of RE1 zoning of Jubilee Oval and Cogra Park be deleted from the draft LEP proposal. I also do not support the compulsory acquisition of properties throughout the LGA for green spaces. I would like the panel to find a better solution for residents, and I trust you will after hearing yesterday's submissions. With regard to the Foreshore Scenic Protection Area, the former Cogra Council only used outdated flora and fauna studies for their final LEP changes. There was no biodiversity study completed, despite the natural landscape being reduced to just 5% of Cogra's pre-European landscape. The former Cogra Council removed the E4 Environmental Living Zone, which was previously known as the Waterfront Scenic Protection Area and Foreshore Scenic Protection Area entirely. Something that was completely unprecedented and blatantly adverse to the aims of SEP 71 and the objects of the Coastal Protection Act. This proposal, for some of it to be reinstated in the former Cogra, is a bonus, but the E4 zoned area should be reinstated entirely. I also believe the specific environmental zones of E1, 2, 3 and 4 should replace the proposed FSPA throughout the LGA, as they will be essential for the future protection and management and possible regeneration of this seriously degraded area of the largest catchment in southern Sydney. Likewise, the proposed changes to the FSPA of the former Hurstville Council should not occur before a minimum of a biodiversity study and an Aboriginal heritage study is completed. The Aboriginal heritage study being a recommendation provided in the Foreshores Strategic Directions paper. Items and places of Aboriginal significance were not included in the Cogra LEP 2012. Bayside Council is completing an Aboriginal heritage study, and both Bayside Council and the Sutherland Shire Council have had biodiversity mapping in place for a decade. Sutherland Council's 2015 LEP changes were also supported by an environment strategy. We put our environment at risk without this knowledge. So I thank you for considering this today.
All right, Councillor, can I ask that you're obviously reading from a submission, a written submission that you prepared, is that correct?
Yes, this note's in front of me.
All right, are you in a position to email that through, please?
Yes, certainly, I'll do it right now.
All right, can you email it to Meryl Bishop, please, the Director of Planning?
Yes.
I'd appreciate that. I'll just see if there are any questions. The panel doesn't have any questions for you, but I am keen to read your submission in further detail.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is either Margaret or David Talakovsky. And we'll go back to the Bakers. Hello, is that Margaret Talakovsky?
David.
Hello, is that Margaret? It is?
Just hold on. They're supposed to call me on the home number, but that's okay.
Okay.
Okay. Or do you want to, because
Would you like us
okay,
to call you
fine.
on the home number?
Yes, please. Yes,
Okay.
please.
What is? Do we have that? We don't have that. Can you
Yeah,
tell us what that is?
I rang yesterday. I'll give it to you.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll call that number.
And David will be speaking. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Mr. Chair, the call is connected.
Hello, is that Mr. David Telekovsky?
Yes, this is David Telekovsky speaking.
Mr. Telekovsky, you're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to make a submission in relation to the draft LEP, and I understand that your
That's correct.
relate to the places of public worship in R2 zones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, please proceed, sir.
Regarding the R2, I support the draft of the Local Environment Plan 220, especially the prohibition of a new place of public worship in R2 low density residence zone.
Okay, and the reason for that, sir?
The reason from that is the creation of extra traffic, the safety of the residents, and in the area where we are living at the moment, we are experiencing parking issues at the moment because we don't have enough parking spots, and having a public of worship will increase the less parking we would have and the safety of the residents, the increase of traffic. We've got 3 schools in the vicinity which have a FL lane which was designed in 1930s, and we are competing in that FL lane between heavy trucks, vehicles and residents. That is my concern, and the other concern is when the parking that will be there established will create much more traffic and the safety of the residents.
Okay, and what street are you in?
I'm in 89 Botany Street.
Okay. All right, so that's the extent of your submission, is it?
No, there's other references. A reference to the decision of Land Environment Court, Nasser Hussain and Georges River Council in 2016. This case should be precedent due to the adverse effect on residents, amenities, parking, traffic, noise, and etc.
Yep. Okay, is that all that you wanted to mention?
Well, yes, yes, I do want to mention and all that. It will affect the people's lives because I work shift work, and when you have amenities of place of worship, will affect not only people's parking and it will affect their lives because many places of worship have a different effect. And I believe everyone is entitled to worship, whatever they wish to worship, but not in a residential area at the expense of the residents.
Yes. All right, thank you. Can you all, I'll just hold on and I'll see if there are any questions. Before I do, just can you advise your wife that her number will be deleted from the recording? If she has.
I will do that.
All right, thank you. Just hold on. I'll see if there's any questions of the panel. No questions of the panel. Thank you, sir, for your submission.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Can we go back to Andrew or Gillian Baker, please?
Mr. Chair, the call is connected.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, they just hung up. I'm sorry.
Try again.
You have.
Okay, for the record, the panel has attempted 3 times to get in touch with Andrew or Gillian Baker. Unfortunately, there was no connection. Can we now move to the submitter, Peter Konstantakis, please?
Mr. Chair, the call is connected.
Mr. Konstantakis, are you available?
Peter Konstantakis, hello.
Yes, you're currently connected to the Georges River Local Planning Panel in relation to the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. I understand that you want to make a submission. Please proceed, sir.
I do, and thank you for the opportunity. And I do apologise. I haven't heard any of the previous comments, so if I'm going over old ground, my apologies. My wife's and I position regarding the local environment plan goes back to there's a bit of historic context that I'd like to set there. We are living on the Esplanade in South Hurstville. We have been, as a street, very vocal about the zoning of our street, going back to 2016 when they were making amendments to the COGRA plan. Our position was made very clear that we believed that this street was, and the nature of the street was more suited to an R3 medium density with a 9-metre limit. I think back then it was probably called some sort of R2. The zoning names have changed. Our position is unchanged, that it should be medium density, with a 9-metre height restriction. We are of the understanding and belief that not only was it the street's position, but also council's position and the position of both local, state and federal members that this street should remain medium density. The only reason that it has moved beyond that, and again there's been insufficient consultation in that space, is because the state back in 2017 said that we're ignoring council's position, local members' position, federal members' position, and we are overruling that medium density and going with the 12-metre high density zoning because the local street and council can rely on the DCP to address any of the matters that were being raised as issues. That position is absolutely superficial and flawed. The council holds no opportunity to argue against a legislated LEP versus a DCP guideline. So we're very concerned with that position. So what we're requesting of the local planning panel is that they take into consideration what occurred back in 2016, go back to the state with a position of medium density and a 9-metre limit, and should the state come back and say that that it needs to be R4, 12 metres, high density, whatever it is, that we then have the opportunity to take that up with the state. But I believe that the street, as consulted at the time, and there was sufficient consultation, this time round, it is our strong opinion that there's been insufficient consultation, perhaps under the shadow of COVID-19, that our position and council's position should remain as per the 2016 findings, that we should remain at medium density.
All right, thank you for that submission. I'll just see if there are any questions to the panel. No questions. Thank you. your submission has been received. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Our next submitter is Adrian Polhill.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Polhill, are you there?
Hello.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Polhill.
Hello.
You're currently before.
Oh, yes.
Yes, you're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel.
Okay. Yep.
In relation to the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. Now, I understand that your topic is the foreshore scenic protection area and the reduction of that. Can I suggest to you that after we have heard over the past 2 days many submissions, detailed submissions on this particular topic, and the areas that you've highlighted in your submission have been mentioned ad nauseum to the panel, and we have a very good understanding of those concerns. It's not that I want you to make submissions, but I just wanted to mention that to you.
Thank you. I've been watching your meeting with much interest, Chairman, and I understand your comments.
All right. Okay, but please proceed, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, panel members. Thank you for your time and expertise. My wife and I recognise you have a very difficult task, which is so important for the future generations who will live and work in the GRC area. We first purchased our first home in Hurstville Grove 38 years ago. We now live at 10 Riverview Avenue in Kyle Bay. We strongly object to the initial draft of the LEP, particularly the proposal to remove something approximately 2,380 properties from the FSPA in the Oakley, Lugano and Pickhurst areas. Consider this direct quote from the GRC website related to trees and biodiversity tree management. I'll quote, "Consultation for Council's Community Strategic Plan has made it clear that our residents value trees and green spaces and want Council to be an environmental leader. As such, our vision at Council is for a local government area which prioritises the protection of trees due to their ecological, aesthetic, social and economic contribution to our lifestyle." I'll continue the quote. "Trees are an important contributor to the character of much of the Georges River area, attracting visitors and property buyers. They are increasingly important to our ever-urbanising environment, providing shade and significantly cooling temperatures, reducing the urban heat island effect, where temperatures remain warmer for longer due to the prevalence of heat-absorbing surfaces such as roads and roofs." End of quote. The initial draft of the LEP, which included significant changes to the FSPA, contradicts this strategic statement. To explain the reasons for our objections, let me fast forward you to the year 2050. You, each of the panel members, are attending respective family gatherings, which include your grandchildren and perhaps your great-grandchildren. One of the children asks you, "Can you tell us about one of your proudest moments?" To which you reply, "Do you remember our recent walk through Oakley and along the Georges River? We saw a powerful owl, butcher birds, grey-headed foxes and a blue-tongued lizard. It was nice and cool. Some of you remarked the river looked so clean that you took a swim." Well, the reason why we all enjoyed that walk was 30 years ago, I was one of a group of experts who recommended parts of the foreshore must be protected from overdevelopment. This was one of my proudest moments. Since then, the variety and numbers of native birds and animals has improved, the water quality in the river is better, and the beautiful old shady trees have survived and thrived. This fills me with joy to know that all of you children will take care of this precious environment for future generations. Now, back to the present.
As I speak to you, an old, mature eucalypt at 118 Kyle Bay Parade is dying. I can provide photos if necessary. It's on a residential block adjacent to a huge new dwelling being constructed right now. In February this year, the tree was in perfect health and harboured a number of native birds and insects. There are currently rainbow lorikeets nesting in one of its many hollows. It will die very, very soon, and the local ecosystem will be damaged forever. Earlier this year at 143 Kyle Parade, we witnessed the removal of several old mature trees to make way for another large dwelling. The current protection guidelines are not good enough. The reason to highlight this recent destruction of the environment is that Kyle Parade is a microcosm of what will happen in the areas in Oatley, Lugano and Peakhurst if the current FSPA is reduced. I know you have a copy of the summary prepared by the strategic planning team of GRC. However, for you to fully understand the concerns of residents who desperately want to conserve the remaining natural environment, it's imperative that you read each and every one of the 400 plus well-researched and carefully considered objections. So in closing, I urge you to put the environment first. The people indigenous to our area did this for thousands of years before Sydney was established. Your decision must ensure the environment will be better than it currently is when it's time to pass it on to the next generation. There should be no doubt in your mind, your final decision must be option 3, including amendments resulting from the findings of the recently announced biodiversity study, as well as conforming to the Greener Places policy released by Rob Stokes yesterday. In yesterday's news regarding the Greener Places policy, it included clear directions from the New South Wales government architect, Abby Galvin, who said maintaining existing green spaces is the status quo, as the status quo was no longer good enough in the urban planning policy. It's not just about sustaining our environment, it's about regenerating our environment. 2020 is the year when you and the GRC and its residents must take big strides to protect the local environment and set an example for others in the Greater Sydney area. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you on behalf of Adrian and Janine Polhill. I can now answer any questions from the panel.
Well, thank you, Mr. Polhill, and I hope I'm a sprightly 90-year-old in 2050.
So do I.
Living up to your expectations that I can talk about what happened in 2020. Anyway, be that as it may, thank you for your submission. Again, I reiterate that we've heard many submissions along the same lines. I'll just see if the panel members have any questions. Yes, Mr. Rahotis has a question for you.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your compelling submission. It's pleasing to have something a little bit different to some of the others.
You're most welcome.
We've had a lot of submissions from members of the community from the former Hurstville side of the local government area, and fewer from your side of the former Cogra local government area. Do you have a view on why that might be the case, and do you get a sense that there's less interest, perhaps, on the former Cogra side?
No, I don't get a view of, that there's less interest. My thinking is that they're equally so. When I talk to residents in this area, they are equally concerned because they use both the ex-Cogra area and also the ex-Hurstville area for recreation and for exercise. So no, I don't actually think there's any less in terms of objections. It just maybe they're too busy to actually make a formal objection. But certainly the people I talk to on both sides are equally adamant that we must protect the environment. Thank you for the question.
I also note that your residence is some distance from the proposed extension of the foreshore scenic protection area. So are you putting forward that your views are indicative of what other residents may have in your area?
So, sorry, the line broke up a little bit. Question again, please.
So your property where you live isn't actually within the proposed expansion of the scenic area. Are you suggesting that your views are representative of other residents in your area?
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
I also have another question for you in relation to the mapping. I take it that you've had a good look at that.
Yes, go ahead.
Right. Well, the mapping in relation to your area, Kyle Bay, are you saying that goes far enough, or should it go further?
Okay. I've just got to say that I believe the option 3 with additional amendments, as suggested by some of the other, I've been watching you all morning, the Skype meeting, as suggested by some of the other objectors to extend, wherever possible, extend some of the foreshore protection areas to the old Cogra area would be most beneficial. Does that answer the question?
I think what I'm putting to you is, do you think, based on the mapping currently proposed, and in the context of the Cogra LGA, the former Cogra LGA, does the mapping line, the area that's shaded in pink, does it go far enough, or should it go further? That's my question.
I believe it should go further. I believe it should go further.
All right. And that should be informed by further biodiversity studies or at least ground truthing. Would you say that that's a fair comment?
I think that's fair enough, yes.
All right. Okay, thank you. I don't think there's any further questions to the panel.
I have a question for the panel.
Yes, go ahead.
May I have one? Yep. Okay. I have a question. When will the panel make its decision, and when will that be made public? And if the decision goes against a huge weight of public concerns and objections, what recourse do the residents have? Thank you.
Okay. Well, firstly, in relation to making a decision, we're hopeful that we will be able to make a decision today or possibly early next week. But whatever decision is reached by the panel, it will be published on the council's website within 24 hours. And your second question is, what recourse do you have? Well, this is a process that you would need to consider with your other residents if you felt that we have done something incorrect and not in accordance with the law. But that's a matter for the public to consider. We have a job to do here to endorse or otherwise the recommendation put before us, and that decision will then be forwarded on to the state government, the Department of Planning. But that is a matter that you'd have to seek your own advice on.
Okay, thank you very much, and please consider in your final deliberations our future generations. I appreciate the time you've taken this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Okay, cheerio. Bye-bye.
Our next submitter is Bernard Deedy.
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Deedy, are you available? Hello, Mr. Deedy, are you there?
Hello, yes. Mr. Deedy speaking.
Yes, Mr. Deedy, it's the Georges River Local Planning Panel here. You've registered to make a submission in relation to the Kingsgrove acquisition. I note that, is it your wife spoke to us earlier today, Julie, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, she made a very detailed submission to us. Is there something else that we could take from your submission, or are you echoing her words?
No, there's something else that I'd like to say as well.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. Well, thank you to the panel for the opportunity to address you today. I'm speaking in regard to my submission relating to the proposal in the draft LEP to rezone and acquire the 6 properties 11 to 21 Monaro Avenue, bordering Peterlow Reserve. I'm a member of the community group of 1,384 people who have objected to the proposal and petitioned council for its removal. I need to put on record the serious deficiencies in community consultation that have occurred with this proposal from the outset. Some speakers have already noted the difficulties in the context of the coronavirus lockdown and social distancing restrictions affecting public meetings. I would note that inadequacies in the process of consultation predated the coronavirus. Following the emergence of the proposal to the wider community, Council provided information that initial plans for the proposal existed in November 2019, yet no effective communication was had with the community. Initial information about the proposal came only by word of mouth in the midst of the lockdown from the 6 affected neighbours, who were the only members of the community to receive letters. Concerned neighbours formed a virtual action group undertaking letterbox drops to the local community, posting information on the proposal on local community bulletin boards, on social media and in the local newspaper, The Leader. Council's initial response to representations from the community on the inadequate consultation referenced externally set deadlines and financial agreements and paid lip service to its own policy. This has been hugely frustrating to the community. As noted in the council agenda papers to the local planning panel, the community strongly objected to the proposal, 1,384 against, only 2 in favour of the proposal. The council agenda papers to the LPP in paragraphs 135, 136 mentions the community had 2 main concerns, namely 1, the impact of the original proposal on existing landowners, and 2, the objections on inconsistency of the proposal in terms of distance from the future growth investigation areas within 800 metres of a walkable catchment. While these were 2 of the main concerns, they by no means were the only concerns, and again, failure by the council to recognise this devalue as community feedback. Other important issues raised by the community submissions are, I'll go through these, I've got 6 of them there in my submission, but these are summarised. 1, failure to address the open space, recreation and community facility strategy, which was commissioned by council, which indicated a deficit in sports fields and ancillary areas, not passive parks, such as Peterlow Reserve, that's been spoken about by other speakers. A failure to address the South District Plan priority for green grid of connected parklands and the open space for recreation guide direction that high density development should be located within 200 metres of high quality open space. And again, it's been noted by other speakers, Peterlow Reserve will never satisfy that requirement, as it is in a long established low density zone and is 1.1 kilometres from any high density proposals. The intrinsic value of Peterlow Reserve, this is point 3, the intrinsic value of Peterlow Reserve as a passive recreation area and its physical limitations in terms of size and slope, indeed, and its value as in terms of design as a park, which is not inhibited by noise from the street and actually is secured in safety terms by not being close to public roads. The absence of this is point 4, absence of any due diligence in transport planning or parking studies. Point 5, the absence of any proper needs analysis in terms of the park and how the needs could be addressed. Point 6, the lack of innovation and the high cost associated with this single strategy approach to property acquisition as a means to enhancing open space and community amenity. I would now address the 3 options identified by Council for the LPP's consideration. Option 1 is effectively a status quo option with no change to the draft proposal and does not address community objections. nothing option in regard to abandoning open space acquisition acquisition in the Hurstville ward. Option 2 is indicated by council as the preferred option, but as other speakers have noted, it only partially addresses the community concerns. Paragraph 143, the first dot point, which states removal of the proposed land reservation acquisition of 11 to 21 Monaro Avenue from the draft LEP is supported and strongly recommended to the LPP, as it addresses the immediate concern of the community. However, as mentioned, the inclusion of the other 2 dot points are rejected as they fail to address concerns raised by the community in respect to the proposal, and they create a confusing hybrid set of contingencies which only serve to create ongoing uncertainty and will continue to foster community concern and agitation. The community still, therefore, has major concerns with the council's preferred option 2 as is. And we believe that that's prejudicial to an optimal outcome for the Hurstville ward and for the council at large. Other speakers have suggested the inclusion of an additional option, which would be clearer, would respect community concerns and still consider the change in community needs for open space. I'd reference Phil Henderson's suggestion of an alternative option 2.5, which he spoke to yesterday, which would retain the first dot point on option 2, but remove the second and third dot points. And I would suggest replacing them with this following dot point. Engage with community in consultation on the more detailed aspects of open parkland requirements in the Hurstville ward, recognising the different needs within the ward and the opportunities offered by the existing 27 parks and other potential spaces in the ward, which I noticed Councillor Bavalati raised the prospect of some of that today. This option recognises the value of proper consultation and is in line with Council's own policies in its stated commitment to achieve best practice in community consultation using IOP2 principles. It provides the opportunity, as the COVID restrictions are ameliorated, for quality information exchange and a valuing of the input on the challenges to be collectively faced with population growth and emerging community preferences. The Community Action Group would offer the opportunity for Council to continue to engage with it and with the wider community in the existing network of communications. I would thank the local planning panel for the opportunity to address you today.
Right, Mr. Deedy, are you addressing what you've just addressed us on? Is that a written submission, a further written submission that you prepared?
The points that I raised, the 6 points are here, are summarised from my submission. Clearly, the option or the suggestion of an alteration to option 2 was after the time that we could make public submissions, and that's been in the context of some of the discussions we've had and the listening that we've done to, because I've been online with the LPP's proceedings yesterday and today. And again, as being the moderator and facilitator of the community networks, I've had the opportunity to read and exchange with all the comments and the communication networks that we've set up with the action group. So I've been privy to all the comments through the various social media and the exchanges that we've had to undertake it in this lockdown. So it incorporates those, yes.
I'm currently looking at a submission that you made dated 31 May to 2020, which has 11 specific points in a table.
Yes.
My question is do you, or the submission that you've just made, has that been reduced to writing? Because obviously there are further matters that you've raised in your oral submission to us that are not covered in these 11 points. So I'm wondering whether
I've just read you a summary document that I've prepared, which I drew from that earlier, more comprehensive submission.
Right.
And incorporated some of the contemporary points that have come up through the dialogue in the last.
Are you in a position to email that through, please?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. Can you mark it to the attention of Merrill Bishop?
Yes.
All right. Can you do that this afternoon?
Can do.
All right. Thank you, sir. I'll just see if there are any questions of the panel. No questions. Thank you for your submission.
Okay. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you. Our next submitter is Chris Stavropoulos. Can we have Mr. Stavropoulos on the phone, please?
Mr. Chair, the caller is connected.
Mr. Stavropoulos, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Yes, hello. You're currently before the Georges River Local Planning Panel to address us on the draft Georges River Local Environmental Plan 2020. And I understand that you want to address us on the compulsory acquisition proposal for land in Kingsgrove. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct. My name is Chris Stavropoulos. I live at 6 Monaro Avenue, Kingsgrove, and this year is my 50-year anniversary of living here. We moved here in 1970. I have asked to speak to you today to respectfully ask that the Monaro Avenue land acquisition proposal be withdrawn altogether, not merely deferred to a future date. My reasons for seeking a withdrawal are these. This proposal was not community driven. It is not seeking to address some local need for more open space in our neighbourhood. In other words, this was a top-down proposal rather than a bottom-up one. The simple fact of the matter is that the Peterlow Reserve has and is serving the local community well in its current form and does not need expansion. Second, next point, the local community have made it very clear that this proposal is not wanted. It is my understanding that a total of 166 submissions were received by the council, with 164 objecting to the proposal. In addition, 1,220 signed petitioners objected online through a change.org petition. Next point. The estimated cost of between $8 and $10 million is a ridiculously expensive proposal for relatively little community benefit. Surely there are much more worthwhile ways of spending $8 to $10 million in the council area. Next point. I participated in the council webinar sessions and I concluded that some of the benefits, if not all of them, of expanding Peterlow Reserve were simply not sustainable. For instance, improved access to the park. The fact is that Peterlow Reserve has no fewer than 3 access paths, one on each side of the boundary streets. These paths are reasonably wide and clearly visible from the respective streetscapes. Another supposed benefit put forward was improved safety and/or public surveillance. There is simply no evidence to support this proposition. Council officers were unable to provide examples of safety-related incidents occurring in PLR during the webinars. It is my understanding that Peterlow Reserve is overlooked by around 38 properties which provide more than adequate public surveillance for a relatively small park. Next point. Deferring the proposal to some future date is grossly unfair to the 6 affected homeowners. I'm not one of them, but deferral of the proposal will have both emotional and financial consequences for these people. I'm sure the panel members can empathise with how these families will feel with having a virtual sword of Damocles hanging over them into the future. Put yourselves in the place of these families and think how you would feel in their situation. Deferring the proposal is not right, nor fair, nor a fair outcome of the consultative process. My last point is this. Things have changed dramatically since with the coronavirus coming upon us. All these state government proposals and LEPs and strategic plans are basically rendered redundant as far as I'm concerned going into the future. The Monaro Avenue proposal has arisen in an attempt to meet some arbitrary open space metric specified by the state government. In a post-coronavirus world, all assumptions about future economic and population growth are no longer valid and or reliable. The current and future consequences of this virus must surely be taken into consideration before all the LEPs are finalised. So that's my final point. The bottom line is all this, our world has been convulsed, both economically and on a health basis, and we don't know what the post-corona world is going to look like. Even yesterday, Qantas sacked 6,000 employees. Heaven knows what our economy and our world is going to look like. So all this minutiae about open spaces and 7.76 hectares of open space, as far as I'm concerned, are rendered unreliable and irrelevant going into the future. But that's it. I want to end there. Thank you very much for listening to me.
All right, just hold the line and I'll see if there are any questions. I don't have any further questions for you. I appreciate your detailed submission. Any questions? Yes, Mr. Brockhoff has a question for you.
Thank you. I've got a question in relation to access from the local area. Do you think the current 3-laneway access into the Triangular Park is a limitation or a barrier to people's awareness and use of the reserve?
Oh, well, I can answer that very clearly. We all live in a digital world. Anyone can go onto Google Maps. If anyone's looking for open space, firstly, this Pigalo Reserve is serving the local community. We all know it's there. And the other thing is you can go onto Google Maps and it's clearly visible. You don't need an advertisement or a proposal to resume 6 properties to make it visible to the public. It's in this digital age we can find. When this proposal came up, I actually got onto Google and did my research and found out how big it was. You know, its dimensions, the whole thing. So it's all that information, the green space is visible on Google Maps. So there's no need. If people are looking for open space, it's clearly visible to them. That sort of signage and opening up this park, this relatively small neighbourhood park anymore, to me is meaningless. It's basically a solution looking for a problem. So that's how I regard this proposal. It's a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist in our neighbourhood.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you, sir, for your submission.
Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Moving to our final submitter for the day is Susie Drakopoulos. Hello, Ms. Drakopoulos, are you there?
I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.
Okay, we might...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Andrew Baker has asked for a callback.
Oh, good. Can you call Mr. Baker, please?
Sure.
No, we spoke to her husband, Peter. Now we're being connected to
Andrew Baker. I'll try again, Mr. Chair. Dialing now, Mr. Chair. The caller is connected, Mr. Chair.
Is that Mr. Baker?
Speaking, yes.
Yes, Mr. Baker, are you before the Georges River Local Planning Panel in relation to making a submission about the draft of Local Environmental Plan 2020? I understand the topic you wish to address us on is the reduction of the foreshore scenic protection area. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Good, thank you. Can I suggest to you that we've heard extensively on this topic, and I think most of your fellow residents have canvassed every issue that they could in relation to the reasoning why it should not apply.
Sure.
Whilst I'm happy for you to make a submission to us, rest assured we've heard quite a number of submissions on this matter.
Okay. Well, listen, in that case, I won't go through my whole spiel.
Are you able to summarise it for us?
Yeah. I particularly wanted to make a plea for Jewfish Point, which is where we live on Marine Drive. And I wanted to make the point that geographically it's a peninsula which sticks out into the river, steep river valley sides on either side, steep blocks other than the narrow flat bit on the top of the ridge. And I think those blocks are entirely inappropriate for high density development. Now, the arguments against it are the same as I'm sure you've heard in terms of traffic and parking issues with one narrow road which goes right around the point, about runoff on the steep blocks, which is already an issue with existing zoning laws. It'll only be made worse by more development on each land. And of course the fact that development leads to loss of trees. And in this particular area, we've got houses quite close to each other, but you feel very private because of the abundance of trees and in the area. And development is going to lose that. We're going to change the nature of this area on Jewfish Point quite substantially if higher density development's allowed. All I want to say is I chose this place to live because it's quiet and it's private and it's green. And I really want to oppose any change which is going to change the character and the nature of this area, and particularly this point. The other thing I can't quite understand is the Foreshore Protection Act is meant to preserve the character of the foreshore. Then where you've got a steep river valley, I don't understand why that doesn't apply from the bottom to the top of the sides of the valley. I mean, I can understand the sort of plateau beyond that somewhat, but the valley itself is the foreshore, and it seems just crazy to us that it's applying to the bottom part of this hill, but not the middle or the top part of the hill.
Okay. Sorry.
So
continue.
Yeah.
Continue on.
Yeah. No, they were the main points that I wanted to make.
All right. So it's your submission that the status quo should remain.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's my submission that the whole of Jewfish Point should be contained within the Foreshore Protection Act, not just the narrow little bit around the bottom, because the whole of Jewfish Point is still on the foreshore.
All right, thank you. I'll just see if there are any questions of the panel. No questions?
No questions.
No questions. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your submission.
Okay. Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Cheerio.
You're welcome. Can we see if we can make some connection with Ms. Dracopoulos, please?
Mr. Chair, the caller has answered.
Hello, is that Susie Dracopoulos?
Dracopoulos? Yes. Hi. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to the panel today. I'm ringing in regards to the Monaro Avenue acquisition of the 6 houses. My parents are one of the residents that are being affected. I'd like to reiterate some of the comments that have been made already. The fact that English is not their first language, obviously, and they were not informed at all or consulted. They don't understand any of the mail or anything that comes to them, so this came as quite a shock to them. My parents are in their 80s and this is their forever home. They have modified it to suit their retirement, and hearing this news that their house can be taken away from them is quite distressing. And the option of deferring it is even more distressing to them because their future is unknown. They cannot see themselves picking up and moving in their 80s to another house. It's just completely, I just can't fathom it. In fact, my mother's mental health is suffering at the moment. In addition to, I'd like to answer or to add to Mr. Stavropoulos's answer to the pathways of the park. My parents have lived in this area in this house for the past 25 years. I also have lived here with my family on occasion. There are 3 pathways. 2 are accessible by foot, and the 3rd one is accessible. It has road access where the greenskeeper comes in and mows the lawn. So there is the community is well aware of the park. The local schools are often found walking and playing in the park. There are lots of community members that walk their dogs in the park, so it is quite well known to the community. So to cut it short, because I know that a lot of the other speakers have repeated the same concerns, we would like to see that this proposal is completely removed and not just deferred, and to maintain Peterlow Reserve as it is, as well as the 6 properties. I might add one more thing. I did attend some of the council webinars and I was shocked to hear that they were quite willing to remove 6 properties with no actual plan for the park. The park is a very awkward shape. It's not flat, it leans. There is no room for any recreational sporting fields or anything like that. So to demolish or to take 6 properties with no actual plan just seems ridiculous. Why would you spend so much money with no plans for the park and then consult the community about what they want to do with this park? The community don't want anything done to the park. They're quite happy as it is. Thank you for your time.
All right, just hold on and I'll see if there are any questions of the panel. I don't have any further questions. We've heard extensively on this issue and we understand the concerns the residents have put to us. Any questions? No further questions from the panel. Thank you for your submission, Mr. Akopoulos, and we do have your written submission as well, dated 28th of May 2020.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that now concludes all of the registered speakers. We will now adjourn to the closed session of the meeting, and a decision will be taken by the panel and published on the council's website in the very near future. We anticipate that will be early next week. Thank you for your attendance, and I appreciate all the submissions that have been made over the last 2 days. It's been quite an exhausting exercise for not only the community but also the panel to accept all of the comments that have been made, and we do appreciate your input because it's invaluable that those comments are thoroughly considered by the panel before making any decision. So I thank you very much for that, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon. The meeting is now closed at 12:47 p.m. Thank you.